The desert air tasted like copper and dust as Colonel Marcus Shepard watched the sun bleed across the Arizona horizon. 5 in the morning, and his knees already ached from the old Fallujah shrapnel that the VA said would hurt less with time. They'd been lying about that for 19 years. His hands wrapped around the pull-up bar in his garage, the metal cold enough to bite. 1 pull-up, 2, 3. His shoulder screamed at number 7. The one that had taken the RPG fragment back in '03, when the world was younger and wars had clearer enemies. 12. 13. The sweat came easier now, mixing with the morning chill. 52 years old, 28 years in uniform. Delta Force, 2 silver stars, 3 purple hearts, and now he wore the forest green of the Border Patrol, hunting coyotes and drug runners instead of insurgents and warlords. Some men called it a step down. Marcus called it penance. The kitchen light snapped on inside the house. Through the window, he could see her. Emma, 17 years old, with her mother's dark eyes and his stubborn jaw. She moved through the kitchen like Sarah used to, efficient and purposeful, already dressed in running clothes even though school didn't start for 3 hours. West Point hopefuls didn't sleep in. Marcus dropped from the bar, his boots hitting concrete with a sound like a judge's gavel. Inside, Emma had already started the coffee. The smell hit him before he opened the door, rich and dark, the way Sarah had taught their daughter to make it before the cancer took her 3 years back. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. But who was counting? Emma looked up from her phone, those dark eyes evaluating him the way she always did now, like she was checking for cracks in his armor. You're favoring the left shoulder again. Good morning to you too, sweetheart. Dad? She set down her phone with the deliberate care of someone preparing for an argument. Dr. Chen said you need to do the physical therapy exercises or the scar tissue will keep building. Dr. Chen can kiss my retired military behind. Classy. But she smiled, and for a moment she was 12 again, before Sarah got sick, before the world learned how to hurt in new and inventive ways. Emma poured him coffee in the mug that said, "World's okayest dad," a Father's Day gift from 4 years back that had somehow become his favorite. I made breakfast, eggs, turkey bacon. Don't give me that look. Your cholesterol numbers were trash at the last checkup. Cancer diagnosis, where he'd opened the cancer diagnosis, where he'd opened the letter from the Army telling him his wife's clearance had been revoked 2 months before she died. That letter had never made sense. Sarah was an ICE attorney, dedicated and brilliant. The revocation came without explanation, without appeal, just a form letter and a closed door. He'd been too focused on keeping her alive to ask questions. Maybe that had been his first mistake. Emma set a plate in front of him, the eggs perfectly over medium the way he liked them. You have that look again. What look? The one where you're somewhere else, somewhere sandy with people shooting at you. She sat across from him with her own plate, smaller portions because she was in training mode. Cross-country season plus West Point prep meant she was running 70 miles a week. Mom wouldn't want you living in the past, you know. Your mother wanted a lot of things. The words came out harder than he'd intended. Sorry, didn't sleep great. The dreams again? He didn't answer, just ate his eggs and watched his daughter watch him. Emma had inherited more than Sarah's eyes. She'd gotten that laser focus, that way of seeing through smoke and mirrors to the truth underneath. Sarah had used it in courtrooms, taking apart lies with surgical precision. Emma would use it at West Point, then in whatever battlefield the next war demanded. If he could keep her alive long enough to get there. I'm staying late at the center today, Emma said, casual in the way that meant she expected resistance. Rodriguez's family just crossed, 3 kids under 10. They need someone bilingual to help with intake forms. Emma, Marcus set down his fork. We've talked about this. About me volunteering at the Immigrant Support Center? Yes, Dad, many times. You don't like it. I do it anyway. It's kind of our thing. It's not safe. It's a church basement in Tucson with a volunteer coordinator who's 74 and knits sweaters for the kids. What's unsafe is the journey those families made to get here. Her jaw set, that shepherd's stubbornness rising. Mom spent her whole career fighting for them, and I can spend a few hours a week doing paperwork. Sarah, always Sarah, the ghost at every table, the voice in every argument. Marcus had loved his wife with the kind of intensity that left scars, and losing her had been like losing a limb. But sometimes he wondered if Emma loved the memory of her mother more than the reality of her father. He reached across the table, caught her hand. Be careful. And text me when you're heading home. Always do? She squeezed his fingers, then stood, gathering her plate. You've got that briefing at 0700, right? The cartel activity update? How do you know about that? Dad, I want to go to West Point. I pay attention to border security briefings like normal girls pay attention to Instagram. She kissed the top of his head on her way to the sink. Also, you left the file on the counter last night. You should really work on your operational security. Brat! Learn from the best. She left for her run 20 minutes later, her footsteps fading into the pre-dawn darkness. Marcus watched from the window until she turned the corner, then watched for another 30 seconds because the world was full of things that could hurt a 17-year-old girl, and he'd already failed to protect one woman he loved. He wouldn't fail again. The Border Patrol station squatted in the desert like a concrete bunker, designed by someone who'd never heard of aesthetics. Marcus pulled his truck into the lot at 6:45, early enough to review the briefing materials one more time before the circus started. Captain Ryan Cole was already there, leaning against his vehicle with a coffee that smelled expensive. 35, former SEAL, and ambitious in the way that made Marcus's instincts itch. Cole had requested transfer to Marcus's tactical unit 8 months ago, citing a desire to learn from the best. At the time, Marcus had been flattered. Lately, he'd been wondering what Cole was really learning. Morning, sir. Cole straightened, that military posture that never quite left no matter how many years you'd been out. Big day. Just another briefing, Captain. Not according to Commander Vance. Cole's smile didn't reach his eyes. Word is he's got something special for us. Harrison Vance. The name still carried weight, even after all these years. Vance had been Marcus's commanding officer in Iraq, back when Marcus was Delta and Vance was Army intelligence running operations out of Fallujah. They'd bled together, fought together, and Marcus had carried Vance out of a collapsed building after a mortar strike that should have killed them both. You didn't forget debts like that. After Iraq, Vance had climbed the ladder. Now he was Deputy Director of Homeland Security's Southwest region, a position with enough power to move mountains or bury bodies, depending on your perspective. Special how? Marcus asked. Guess we'll find out. Cole dumped his coffee, checked his watch. Briefing in 10. The tactical operations room smelled like burnt coffee and old sweat. 12 officers, all handpicked for the unit that handled the cases too sensitive for regular Border Patrol. Drug interdiction, human trafficking, cartel violence spillover. The jobs that required military precision and a willingness to bend rules when the situation demanded it. Marcus took his usual seat at the front, flanked by Cole and Specialist Danny Reeves. Reeves was 28, former Marine Scout sniper, quiet in the way of men who'd learned to measure words like ammunition. He'd saved Marcus's life during a cartel ambush 6 months back, putting a round through a Sicario's skull from 800 meters out. Marcus trusted him in ways he didn't trust most people. The door opened. Commander Harrison Vance walked in, and the room snapped to attention more from instinct than regulation. Vance was 58 now, gray creeping into his temples, but he still moved like the warrior he'd been. The uniform was Homeland Security blue instead of Army green, but the bearing was pure officer class. His eyes swept the room, cataloging, assessing, the way they always had. When they landed on Marcus, something flickered there. Recognition, memory, maybe regret. At ease, gentlemen. Vance's voice carried the same authority it had 20 years ago in the desert. We have a situation. He pulled up a map on the projector, satellite imagery of a ranch compound 20 miles south of the border in Sonora, Mexico. The building looked abandoned, the kind of place cartels use for staging operations. 3 days ago, ICE received intel from a high-value informant embedded in the Cordero cartel. This informant has provided actionable intelligence on trafficking routes, including the identities of 17 key operators. Vance tapped the screen, highlighting the ranch. The informant needs immediate extraction. The cartel discovered the leak. We have a 4-hour window before they move her. Her? Reeves spoke up from the back. Sir, what's the informant's background? Former cartel accountant. She's been feeding us information for 6 months. If we lose her, we lose our entire intelligence pipeline into the Cordero operation. Vance's eyes found Marcus, which is why I'm asking for the best. Colonel Shepard, this is your op. The room went quiet. Cross-border extractions weren't standard Border Patrol operations. They required approval from multiple agencies, coordination with Mexican authorities, the kind of red tape that could strangle an operation before it started. Sir, Marcus stood, his command voice coming back like muscle memory. With respect, this should go through official channels, State Department, DEA liaison. We don't have time for channels, Mac. The use of his old call sign hit like a punch. Vance only used it when things were serious. This woman has intel on trafficking routes that funnel through Arizona. Children, Mac, hundreds of them every year. If we lose her, we lose the entire network. Children. The word hung in the air like smoke. Marcus thought about Emma at the immigrant center, helping families fill out paperwork. He thought about the 3 kids they'd intercepted yesterday, the ones with bruises and dead eyes. He thought about Sarah, who'd spent her last healthy years fighting trafficking cases in court. What's the timeline, he asked. Wheels up in 4 hours. You'll have a Black Hawk, full tactical support. In and out, minimum footprint. Vance pulled up another slide showing the extraction route. The informant will be waiting in the main building. Secure her, get to the LZ, extract. Standard rescue op. Cole leaned forward. Sir, what about hostile presence? Cartel security? Intelligence suggests the compound is abandoned. The informant chose it specifically for that reason. Vance's eyes never left Marcus. But I'm not sending you in blind. You pick your team. You plan the approach. You have full operational authority. It was a good pitch. Trust the experienced officer. Give him autonomy. Appeal to his protective instincts with the mention of children. It was maybe too good. Marcus had learned to trust his instincts in Fallujah, in Afghanistan, in a dozen other places where hesitation meant body bags. Right now, those instincts were screaming. Something about this operation felt wrong. The timeline was too tight, the intelligence too convenient. And Vance, who never personally briefed tactical operations, was standing in this room making the pitch himself. But Vance had saved Marcus's career twice, had written the recommendation that got him into Delta Force, had carried Marcus's wounded body 3 clicks through enemy territory in Helmand Province when Marcus took shrapnel to both legs. You didn't question men like that. You trusted them. I'll need Cole and Reeves, Marcus said, and one more. Name it. James Ortega. He's retired running a ranch in New Mexico, but he's former Delta, and I trust him with my life. Done. Vance nodded. Anything else? Just one question, sir. Marcus held Vance's gaze. Why me? You've got teams specifically trained for cross-border ops. Why pull me for this? For a moment, something crossed Vance's face. It might have been guilt. It might have been calculation. It was gone before Marcus could be sure. Because you're the only man I trust to bring her home, Mac. The only one who understands what's at stake. Vance closed his briefcase. 4 hours. Don't be late. He left, and the room erupted in low conversations. Cole clapped Marcus on the shoulder. Hell of an op, sir, like old times. Yeah. Marcus stared at the satellite image of the ranch. Just like old times. But old times had taught him that the missions that looked easiest usually cost the most blood. Marcus called Jimmy Ortega from the parking lot, watching the sun climb higher over the desert. The phone rang 4 times before a familiar voice answered, rough with sleep and old cigarettes. This better be good, Mac. I got a horse with colic and a wife who thinks I should be retired enough to fix the fence she's been complaining about for 3 months. Need you for a job, Jimmy. Silence on the line, then quieter. What kind of job? The kind where I need someone I trust at my 6. Mac. Jimmy sighed, and Marcus could picture him in his ranch house kitchen, probably already reaching for his boots. I got one leg that's mostly titanium and a back that sounds like Rice Krispies when I stand up. I'm 58 years old and my last deployment was 6 years ago. You're also the best door kicker I ever worked with. And you owe me for that thing in Kabul. I knew you'd bring up Kabul eventually. But there was a smile in Jimmy's voice now. What's the op? Marcus laid it out. The informant, the extraction, the 4-hour window. He left out his doubts, his instincts screaming warnings he couldn't articulate. When he finished, Jimmy was quiet for a long moment. Then, Mac, does Emma know you're running across the border? This isn't about Emma. Everything's about Emma now, brother. Ever since Sarah... Jimmy trailed off, the way people always did when they mentioned the dead. Look, I'm in. You know I'm in. But maybe you should tell your daughter you're doing something dangerous, just in case. In case what? In case the universe decides to be a bastard again. Marcus ended the call and sat in his truck, staring at his phone. He should call Emma. Tell her he loved her. Tell her to be careful at the center tonight. Instead, he texted, got called in for overnight op. See you tomorrow. Love you. Her response came 30 seconds later. Stay safe, old man. Mom's watching, so don't do anything stupid. He smiled despite the weight in his chest. Then he started the truck and headed home to gear up. The house felt too quiet when he walked in. Emma was at school, wouldn't be home until after her volunteer shift at the center. The note she'd left on the kitchen counter said she'd be back by 8, had leftovers in the fridge if he got hungry, loved him. Marcus stood in the kitchen where he'd had breakfast with his daughter 6 hours ago and felt the weight of all his failures pressing down like atmospheric pressure before a storm. He'd failed Sarah, hadn't seen the signs of her illness until it was too late, hadn't asked the right questions about why her security clearance was revoked, hadn't protected her from whatever had put that fear in her eyes those last few months. He wouldn't fail Emma. In the bedroom, he pulled his tactical gear from the closet. Body armor, rated for rifle rounds, night vision goggles, medical kit, the Sig Sauer 226 that had been his sidearm for 20 years, the grip worn smooth from use. He loaded 3 magazines, checked the action, holstered it. On the dresser, Sarah smiled at him from a photograph. Their wedding day, her in white, him in dress uniform, both of them young enough to think love could armor you against the world's sharp edges. "I'm doing this for her," he told the photo. "For all of them, the kids who need protecting." Sarah's frozen smile didn't answer. The dead never did. The Black Hawk sat on the tarmac at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, rotors already spinning, the sound of physical force that vibrated in Marcus's chest. Cole and Reeves were already aboard, checking weapons and gear with the mechanical efficiency of men who'd done this dance 1,000 times. Jimmy Ortega arrived in a dust-covered pickup, moving with the careful gait of a man whose body had taken too much punishment. His prosthetic left leg was state-of-the-art, courtesy of the VA, but Marcus could see the pain in his old friend's eyes. "You look like hell," Marcus said. "You look old." Jimmy grinned, the years falling away. "Let's go play soldier one more time." They boarded. The pilot, Rodriguez, gave them a thumbs up. The crew chief closed the door. The world dropped away, the Black Hawk lifted, banking south toward the border and whatever waited in that abandoned ranch. Marcus closed his eyes and felt the familiar pre-mission calm settle over him. This was what he knew, what he was good at. The chaos and violence and split-second decisions that separated the living from the dead. He didn't see Cole watching him from across the cabin, something cold and calculating in the captain's eyes. He didn't know that 20 miles away, Emma was leaving school early, heading to the immigrant center where a text message had just told her an emergency family needed immediate help. He didn't know that Vance was in his office, making a phone call that would destroy everything Marcus had left to lose. The helicopter flew south through darkening skies, and Marcus Shepard believed he was flying toward a rescue mission. He had no idea he was flying into the end of his world. The desert stretched below them like the surface of Mars, all red rock and scrub brush, painted in shades of amber by the setting sun. Marcus checked his watch. 1,800 hours. 2 hours until full dark. The ranch compound appeared on the horizon, exactly where the satellite imagery had shown it. Too perfect. Too quiet. The thought whispered through Marcus's mind like smoke. 2 minutes out, Rodriguez's voice crackled through the headset. "LZ is cold. No movement on thermal." Marcus keyed his mic. "Cole, Reeves, you ready?" "Born ready, sir." Cole's voice carried an edge Marcus couldn't identify. Excitement, maybe, or something darker. "Jimmy?" His old friend checked his rifle one last time, the M4 looking natural in his hands despite the years away. "Let's get this done and get home. Maria's making tamales tonight, and if I miss them, she'll shoot me herself." The Black Hawk descended, kicking up a dust storm that turned the world into a brown haze. Marcus's boots hit dirt, weapon up, scanning for threats. The others fanned out in a tactical formation that required no discussion. Muscle memory from 100 operations taking over. The ranch house stood silent. No lights, no movement, no dogs barking or vehicles running. No signs of life at all. "Commander Vance, this is Shepard Actual." Marcus spoke into his radio. "We're on site. Compound appears abandoned. Requesting permission to proceed." Static crackled for 5 long seconds. Then Vance's voice, steady and certain. "Proceed, Shepard. Informant should be in the main building. Red door." Red door. Marcus scanned the compound and found it. A single door painted the color of dried blood. "Reeves, you're on overwatch. Find high ground and cover our approach. Jimmy, you've got rear security. Cole with me." Marcus moved forward, every sense screaming warnings he couldn't articulate. They reached the door. Marcus tested the handle, unlocked. "Too easy," Jimmy muttered from behind them. "Yeah." Marcus pushed the door open, night vision showing him an empty room. No furniture, No informant, just bare concrete floors, and his boot hit something. Marcus looked down and his world stopped. A cell phone, screen glowing with a single message. "I'm sorry, Mac." "Contact!" Cole's shout came the same instant the world exploded. Muzzle flashes erupted from every window, every doorway, every shadow. The red door splintered under automatic weapons fire. Marcus threw himself left, rolling behind a concrete pillar as rounds chewed the space where he'd been standing. "Ambush! It's a trap!" He heard his own voice screaming into the radio, heard Reeves returning fire from his position, heard Jimmy's M4 barking in 3-round bursts. Then he heard something that made his blood freeze. Cole's weapon pointed at him, not at the enemy, at him. "Sorry, Colonel." Cole's face was calm, almost sad. Orders are orders. The bullet caught Marcus in the ceramic plate of his body armor, the impact throwing him backward. He fired on instinct, saw Cole stumble, clutching his shoulder. But the captain was already moving, disappearing into the chaos of gunfire and smoke. "Mac," Jimmy's voice over the radio. "They've got us surrounded. I count 20, maybe 30 hostiles." "Fall back to the LZ." Marcus scrambled for cover, his ribs screaming where the bullet had hit his armor. "Rodriguez, we need immediate evac." The radio crackled. Rodriguez's voice came back tense. "Negative, Shepard. I've got 2 technicals approaching from the north. They've got 50 cals. If I stay on the ground, they'll shred us." "Then get airborne and stand by." "Copy. Good luck, sir." The Black Hawk's rotors increased in pitch, and Marcus watched his only escape route lift into the darkening sky. He and Jimmy were alone, surrounded by enemies who knew exactly where they were. From somewhere in the darkness, a voice called out in English. American English. "The woman! Don't let Shepard escape. Vance wants proof of death." Vance. The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. His commanding officer. His friend. The man he'd saved in Fallujah, who'd saved him in Helmand. The man who'd looked him in the eye 6 hours ago and sent him into a kill box. "Mac, we gotta move." Jimmy grabbed his arm, hauled him to his feet. "There's a canyon 200 meters west. It's our only chance." They ran. Bullets chased them, kicking up dust and sparks. Marcus heard Jimmy grunt, stumble, keep moving. Heard the distinctive crack of Reeves' sniper rifle from somewhere in the rocks, buying them seconds they couldn't afford. "Reeves, fall back!" Marcus shouted into his radio. "Negative, sir, I can." The radio cut off with a wet, choking sound. "Danny! Danny!" No response. Just the sound of gunfire and Jimmy's labored breathing beside him. They reached the canyon edge. Below them, 40 feet of empty air ending in rocks and darkness. Behind them, flashlights and voices closing in. "We jump! We die!" Jimmy gasped. Blood ran down his leg, dark and wet. "We stay. We die for sure." Marcus gripped his friend's arm. "On 3. 1, 2. The grenade landed 3 feet away, small and dark and inevitable. Marcus didn't think. He grabbed Jimmy and threw them both over the edge. Time slowed. He saw the stars above, cold and distant, heard Jimmy scream, felt the grenade detonate, the shockwave lifting them, throwing them further out. Then they hit the canyon floor and time caught up all at once. Pain exploded through Marcus's body, ribs cracking, head bouncing off rock, the taste of blood and copper and failure. He rolled, trying to reach Jimmy, and felt his leg bend wrong, bone grinding against bone. His vision went white, then red, then started to fade to black. Above him, flashlights swept the canyon rim. Voices called out in Spanish and English. "Check the canyon. Vance wants confirmation on both bodies." Footsteps on rock, getting closer. Marcus lay still, blood running down his face, his legs screaming agony. Beside him, Jimmy wasn't moving, wasn't breathing. A flashlight beam passed directly over Marcus's face. He didn't blink, didn't breathe. Became nothing more than another piece of broken desert rock. "Just debris down here. Nothing survived that fall. Vance wants confirmation. All 3 bodies. We got the sniper. These 2 went over the cliff with a grenade at their backs. They're dead. Let's move." The voices faded. The footlights retreated. And Marcus Shepard lay in the darkness beside his dead friend, listening to the sound of his own heartbeat counting down the seconds he had left. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Somehow it had survived the fall. Marcus dragged it out with shaking hands. The screen cracked but functional. A text message from Emma. "Dad, weird question. Did you tell the center I was coming tonight? They said you called ahead, but the number was blocked." Ice flooded Marcus's veins, colder than the desert night. Another message. "There's a family here that needs help. They specifically asked for me. Says you recommended me?" No, 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 no. Marcus tried to dial, but his fingers wouldn't work right. Tried to text, but the phone slipped from his blood-slicked hands. One more message appeared. Dad, are you okay? You're scaring me. Then a video message. Marcus's broken finger managed to press play. Emma, his daughter, in a room he didn't recognize, sitting in a chair, her hands zip-tied behind her back, her eyes wide with terror and confusion. Behind her, a figure stepped into frame. Captain Ryan Cole, blood staining his shoulder where Marcus had shot him. Cole looked directly at the camera. Hello, Colonel. If you're watching this, you survived the fall. Impressive. But it doesn't matter anymore. He placed a hand on Emma's shoulder. She flinched. Your daughter is bait for a bigger fish. Vance has questions only you can answer. Questions about your wife, about what Sarah found before she died. Cole's smile was empty of warmth. You have 48 hours to turn yourself in, or Emma joins your wife. Your choice. The video ended. Marcus Shepard lay in the canyon darkness, his body broken, his team dead, his daughter in the hands of the man who'd betrayed him. Above him, the stars wheeled through their ancient patterns, uncaring and cold. He tried to stand and his leg folded, bone grinding against bone. He screamed into the dirt, muffling the sound because they might still be listening. Jimmy Ortega lay 3 feet away, his eyes open and empty, his prosthetic leg torn away by the blast. His phone had fallen from his pocket, the screen showing a photo of his wife Maria and their 3 kids. Marcus had promised to keep him safe, had promised Emma he'd come home, had promised Sarah on her deathbed that he'd protect their daughter. He'd failed them all. But as consciousness started to fade, as shock and blood loss dragged him toward darkness, one thought burned through the pain. Emma was alive. Cole had said 48 hours. That meant they needed him for something, needed information he supposedly had, which meant Emma had a value, which meant she was alive. Marcus Shepard had been Delta Force, had survived Fallujah and Helmand and a dozen other hells, had learned to keep breathing when every rational reason said to quit. He wasn't quitting now. His daughter needed him, and he would crawl through hell itself to reach her. The desert night deepened around him. Somewhere far above, a helicopter circled, searchlights sweeping the canyon. They were looking for bodies. They wouldn't find one, because Marcus Shepard was already dead, killed in a border patrol operation gone wrong. His name would be on a memorial wall, his service record would be sealed, his daughter would become a ghost, like the hundreds of other children who disappeared at the border every year. That was Vance's plan. That was the trap. But dead men had certain advantages. They could move without leaving traces, strike without being suspected. And most importantly, they had nothing left to lose. Marcus forced his broken body to move, inch by agonizing inch, deeper into the canyon where the searchlights couldn't reach. Every movement was fire, every breath was knives. But he moved, because Emma needed him, because Sarah deserved justice, because Harrison Vance had made the mistake of leaving him alive. And that was a mistake Marcus Shepard intended to make him regret for whatever time remained before one of them was truly, finally dead. The stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant, as the last Shepard began his long walk home through enemy territory, toward a daughter who didn't know he was coming, toward a truth his dead wife had died protecting, toward a reckoning that would burn everything down or save what little remained worth saving. The hunt had just begun, and this time the prey was fighting back. Pain was a living thing with teeth and claws, and it lived in every nerve of Marcus Shepard's body. The canyon floor was cold enough to leach the heat from his bones, but he couldn't feel the cold anymore. Just the fire in his leg, where the bone had snapped, the knives in his ribs, where the armor had cracked, the pounding in his skull where he'd hit rock going 40 miles an hour. Dawn came slow, painting the canyon walls in shades of blood and rust. Marcus had spent the night crawling, dragging his broken leg behind him like dead weight, following the dry riverbed deeper into the labyrinth of stone. Every few hundred yards he'd stop, listen for pursuit, then keep moving because stopping meant dying, and dying meant Emma died too. Jimmy Ortega's body was half a mile behind him now. Marcus had wanted to bring him out, give him a proper burial, let Maria and the kids say goodbye. But the dead didn't need closure. The living did, and Emma was still alive. He had to believe that. The sun climbed higher, turning the canyon into an oven. Marcus's canteen was empty. His lips cracked and bled. Flies found the blood on his face and settled there, patient as undertakers. He kept crawling. By noon, the hallucinations started. Sarah walked beside him in her blue dress, the one she'd worn to Emma's 8th grade graduation. She didn't speak, just watched him with those dark eyes that had seen through every lie he'd ever told. "I know," Marcus whispered to the ghost. "I know I failed you. Failed Emma. Failed Jimmy." His voice was sandpaper on stone. "But I'm going to fix it. I promise." Sarah's ghost said nothing. The dead never did. The radio on his belt crackled, making Marcus freeze. He'd thought it destroyed in the fall, but Delta Force equipment was built to survive worse than canyon floors. The voice that came through was filtered through static, but Marcus knew it like he knew his own heartbeat. "Shepard teams, this is Commander Vance, confirming all 3 operatives KIA. Repeat, Shepard, Reeves, and Ortega are confirmed killed in action. Cartel ambush at 00-200 hours. Recovery teams are securing the area. Their families have been notified." Marcus's hands shook as he keyed the transmit button. He wanted to scream, to rage, to let Vance know he'd failed. But training ran deeper than emotion. He released the button without speaking. Another voice came through, younger, uncertain, one of the other tactical officers from the unit. "Sir, what about extraction? The bodies?" "Cartel took them." Vance's voice was steady, practiced. The voice of a man who'd told this lie before. "Standard practice. They'll turn up in a ditch somewhere. We'll recover them when we can." "And the families?" "I'll handle the notifications personally." Shepard and Ortega were heroes. They deserved that much. The radio went silent. Marcus lay in the dirt, listening to his own commander erase him from existence with the casual efficiency of a man deleting emails. Somewhere in Tucson, Emma was waking up in whatever hell Vance had prepared for her. Somewhere in New Mexico, Maria Ortega was learning her husband was dead. And here in the Sonora Desert, Marcus Shepard was becoming a ghost. He pulled himself under an overhang of rock, out of the sun's direct fury, and let his eyes close. Just for a moment, just to gather strength. He woke to the sound of voices. Marcus's hand found his pistol, but his fingers were too weak to grip properly. The voices grew closer, speaking Spanish in the rapid-fire cadence of men who'd grown up on these borderlands. Smugglers, maybe. Or cartel scouts checking the canyon for survivors. He couldn't fight, could barely move. If they found him, he was dead. The voices stopped directly above his hiding spot. Footsteps on rock. The sound of someone jumping down into the canyon, boots hitting sand with a soft thump. Marcus closed his eyes and became stone. Became nothing. The way Delta Force had taught him in SEER school when they'd buried him alive for 3 days to teach him how to survive capture. "Not a key," the voice said. "Nothing here." "Check further down. Vance is paying 50,000 American for the woman they're hunting." Marcus's eyes snapped open. The woman, not the man. They were hunting for a woman. Why would a woman be out here? Who knows? Vance's people are hunting someone. They've got half the cartel on payroll looking. The voice paused. "Miguel says they're also looking for an American colonel. Border Patrol. Supposedly died in the ambush last night. But Vance wants confirmation." Dead men don't need confirming. This one does. Vance is scared of him. The voices moved away, fading into the canyon's acoustic maze. Marcus waited 10 minutes, then 20, then forced his broken body to move again. 50,000 for a woman. But who? The supposed informant had been a lie, bait for the trap. So who was Vance hunting that was worth that kind of money in a region where life was cheaper than bullets? The question gnawed at him as he crawled deeper into the canyon, following the dry riverbed toward what he hoped was civilization, toward water, toward help, toward answers. The sun was setting again when Marcus finally saw it. A structure in the distance, small and white against the darkening desert. A church, the kind of mission chapel that dotted the border region like prayer beads on a rosary. He'd covered maybe 3 miles in 36 hours. His leg was infected now. He could smell it. That sweet rot smell that meant gangrene wasn't far behind. His vision kept doubling, tripling, the world turning into a kaleidoscope of pain and exhaustion. But churches meant people, meant water, meant maybe, possibly, a chance. Marcus dragged himself the last 100 yards, every movement a negotiation with a body that wanted nothing more than to quit. The church doors were open, light spilling out into the gathering dark. He could hear voices inside singing in Spanish, a hymn he didn't recognize, but that sounded like hope. He pulled himself up the steps, his broken leg leaving a smear of blood and dirt, reached for the door, and collapsed across the threshold into unconsciousness. When Marcus woke, he was staring at a ceiling made of rough-hewn beams and plaster. The smell of antiseptic mixed with incense and old candle wax. Somewhere nearby, someone was speaking in low tones, the words blurred by whatever drugs were keeping the pain at a manageable roar instead of a scream. He tried to sit up. Gentle hands pushed him back down. "Easy, my son. You've been unconscious for 2 days. Your body needs rest." Marcus focused on the face above him. An older man, maybe 60, with gray hair and the weathered features of someone who'd spent a lifetime in the desert sun. He wore the black shirt and white collar of a priest. "Where?" Marcus's voice came out as a croak. "St. Christopher's, a few miles from the border on the Mexican side." The priest held a cup of water to Marcus's lips. "I'm Father Thomas Brennan, and you, unless I miss my guess, are the dead man Commander Vance is looking for." Marcus's hand moved toward his weapon, but it wasn't there. Neither was his gear, his radio, anything that identified him. "Peace." Father Brennan raised his hands. "If I wanted you dead, I'd have left you on my doorstep for the vultures. Instead, I've spent 2 days cleaning your wounds and pumping you full of antibiotics that cost more than my monthly stipend." "Why?" "Because a man doesn't survive what you survived by accident. And because I've spent the last 8 years watching Vance's people destroy families for profit. Enemy of my enemy, Colonel Shepard." The use of his name made Marcus's blood run cold. "How do you know who I am?" "Your fingerprints are in the system. I have a contact who runs them for me when I find someone interesting." Brennan sat back, studying Marcus with eyes that had seen too much and judged too little. "Plus you match the description in the bounty notice Vance put out. 52 years old, Delta Force tattoo on your left shoulder, shrapnel scars from Fallujah, and a daughter named Emma who's currently being held at a compound 30 miles from here." Marcus tried to sit up again, and this time the pain led him. His left leg was in a makeshift splint, wrapped in clean bandages. His ribs were taped. Someone had cleaned the blood from his face and stitched the gash on his scalp. "Emma, where is she? Is she alive?" "As of yesterday, yes. Vance is using her as leverage." Brennan's face was grave. "He's been broadcasting on encrypted channels, offering you a deal. Surrender yourself, and she goes free." "That's a lie." "Of course it's a lie. Vance doesn't release witnesses, but it keeps you predictable, gives him a chance to set another trap." The priest stood, moved to the window. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Marcus swung his legs off the cot, testing his weight. The splinted leg held barely. "I'm going to get my daughter back. Then I'm going to kill Harrison Vance." Admirable sentiment. Terrible plan. Brennan turned back. "Vance has 40 armed men at that compound. He controls the local cartel through bribes and blackmail. He has contacts in every law enforcement agency on both sides of the border. You're one man with a broken leg and no resources. Then I die trying. Or," Brennan said quietly, "you let me help you." Marcus studied the priest with new eyes. The man moved like someone who'd known violence intimately, despite the collar. His hands were scarred, knuckles thick from old breaks, and his eyes held that flat certainty of men who'd killed and made peace with it. "Who are you really, Father?" Brennan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm a priest who runs an underground railroad for people Vance's network destroys. I've saved 43 souls in the last 3 years. Children, mostly. The ones who escape his trafficking operation." He paused. "I'm also former IRA, Belfast, back when the Troubles meant something. But that was a different life, a different man. God granted me redemption. I'm trying to earn it. By saving trafficking victims. By fighting the devil in whatever form he takes. Right now, he wears Harrison Vance's face." Brennan pulled a folder from his desk, handed it to Marcus. "These are the faces Vance has taken. 47 children in 8 years, that I know about." Marcus opened the folder. Photographs of kids, ages 6 to 16, every race and background. Missing persons reports, death certificates. Some had been found, most hadn't. "Vance sells them?" Marcus felt sick. "To clients with money and appetites that defy hell itself. Politicians, judges, business executives. People who can pay $100,000 for a child and never worry about consequences." Brennan's voice was flat, controlled. "Your wife knew. She was investigating the pipeline when she died." The room tilted. Marcus gripped the cot to stay upright. "Sarah knew about this?" "She came to me 6 months before she passed. Had evidence," she said. "Documents proving Vance was using his Homeland Security position to facilitate trafficking. She was going to take it to the FBI." Brennan's face softened. "Then she got sick. And when she died, all her evidence disappeared. Seized by Homeland Security during a routine audit of her office." classified and sealed. The cancer. Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. She died of cancer. Did she? Brennan let the question hang in the air like smoke. Marcus remembered the last months. Sarah's sudden decline after a period of improvement. The doctors confused, running tests that showed nothing unusual except her body was shutting down. The way she looked at him those final days, like she wanted to tell him something but couldn't find the words. Vance killed her. I can't prove it, but yes, I believe so. Brennan sat down heavily. Slow-acting poison probably introduced during her chemotherapy. Untraceable. And it removed the threat she posed to his operation. The world crystallized into perfect, terrible clarity. Vance hadn't just betrayed Marcus last night. He'd murdered Sarah 3 years ago, had taken Emma to ensure Marcus's silence, was hunting him now to tie up the last loose end. I'm going to need weapons, Marcus said, and intelligence on that compound. I have both, but Colonel, you need to understand something. Brennan leaned forward. This isn't a rescue mission. It's a war, and wars require allies. I work alone. You worked alone and you ended up broken on my doorstep. What you need is an army. The priest pulled out a phone, sent a quick text. There's someone I want you to meet, someone who has as much reason to hate Vance as you do. 5 minutes later, the church door opened. A woman walked in, maybe 40, with the kind of hard edges that came from surviving things that broke softer people. She wore jeans and a leather jacket, and the way she moved suggested violence was a language she spoke fluently. Colonel Shepard, she said in accented English, Mexican border region, I am Rosa Delgado, and I am going to help you kill Harrison Vance. But first we drink coffee and I tell you about my daughter. Rosa's coffee was strong enough to strip paint, and Marcus was grateful for it. They sat at a small table in the church's rectory, just the three of them. Dawn light filtered through windows that looked out on desert and mountains and a sky so blue it hurt to see. Her name was Anna, Rosa began. 12 years old, smart, funny, wanted to be a veterinarian. Her hands wrapped around her coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. I had crossed the border 2 years before, working in Tucson to send money home. The plan was to bring Anna over legally, but it was taking too long, so she tried to cross on her own. Marcus knew how this story ended. He'd seen it play out 100 times in his Border Patrol career. Kids trying to reunite with parents, falling into the hands of coyotes who saw them as commodities instead of children. Vance's men found her at the border, told her they were Border Patrol, that they would help her find me. Rosa's voice was steady, but Marcus could see the tremor in her hands. By the time I realized she was missing, she'd been in the pipeline for 2 weeks. I spent 8 months searching, calling every agency, every shelter, everyone who might know something. How did you find her? Marcus asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. A shipping container at the port of Los Angeles. 42 children inside, being prepared for transport to Dubai. Rosa's eyes were dry, but they held the kind of pain that was beyond tears. Anna had been drugged to keep her docile. When they stopped the drugs, her body went into shock. She died 3 hours after I found her. The silence stretched long enough to ache. I'm sorry, Marcus said and meant it. Sorry doesn't bring her back, but killing the men who took her might let me sleep again. Rosa set down her cup. After Anna died, I learned the truth. Vance runs the entire Southwest pipeline, uses his position to identify vulnerable children, has contacts in ICE, Border Patrol, even local police who flag at-risk kids. Then his people scoop them up, process them through a network of safe houses, and ship them to buyers. How many? Marcus forced himself to ask. 300 per year. That we know about. Father Brennan spoke up. Rosa and I have been running our own operation for 3 years now. We intercept shipments when we can, get kids to safety, but we're fighting a river with a teaspoon. For every child we save, Vance processes 10 more. Marcus thought about Emma, 17 years old, brilliant and brave, probably terrified out of her mind right now. Thought about all the other children who'd been where Emma was, except they had no Delta Force father coming to rescue them. Tell me about your operation, he said. We call it El Camino de los Perdidos, the Road of the Lost. Rosa pulled out a map, spread it on the table. We have safe houses on both sides of the border, doctors who treat the children without reporting, truck drivers who transport them to legitimate shelters, even a few Border Patrol agents who are sick of Vance's corruption. How many people in your network? 23, not fighters mostly, but good people who are willing to risk everything to do what's right. She pointed to locations on the map. This church is our hub. From here, we can reach most of Vance's pipeline within a few hours. Marcus studied the map, saw the pattern immediately, the way his Delta Force training had taught him to see terrain and opportunity. Vance's compound is here, 30 miles north. You said you have contacts who can get intel? We have someone on the inside, a guard who lost his nephew to the pipeline. He feeds us information when he can. Brennan tapped the compound location. Emma is being held in the main building, 3rd floor, west wing, 6 guards on rotation. Vance visits twice a day. Security? 40 men total, former military, most of them, armed with automatic weapons, night vision, the full tactical package. Rosa's expression was grim. It's a fortress, Colonel. A direct assault would be suicide. Then we don't assault it directly. Marcus felt the old familiar clarity settling over him, the battle mind that had kept him alive through 2 decades of war. We make Vance think I'm coming for Emma, draw his forces out of position. Then we hit him from an unexpected angle. And how do we draw out 40 armed men? Marcus smiled, and it was not a kind expression. We give Vance exactly what he wants, a chance to kill me personally. The plan took shape over the next 2 hours, refined by people who understood asymmetric warfare and desperation in equal measure. Marcus would broadcast his position, pretending to be injured and cornered. Vance would send teams to capture him, thinning the compound's defenses. While Vance was focused on Marcus, Rosa's people would infiltrate the compound and extract Emma. It was risky. It was probably suicidal. It was exactly the kind of plan that had worked in Fallujah when Marcus's Delta team was outnumbered 20-1. There's one problem, Brennan said as they finalized details. Vance knows you, knows how you think. He'll expect a trap, which is why it can't just be a trap. It has to be real enough that he believes it. Marcus stood, testing his weight on the splinted leg. The pain was manageable now, thanks to whatever antibiotics Brennan had been pumping into him. I need to be somewhere he'll find me, somewhere he can surround and control, somewhere that makes tactical sense for a wounded man to hole up. And where would that be? Marcus looked out the window at the desert beyond. There's an old mining camp 20 miles east. My unit used to train there, multiple exits, good sight lines, defensible position. Vance knows I know about it. So you're going to hide in a place he expects you to be and hope he doesn't kill you before we can get Emma out. Rosa shook her head. That's not a plan, Colonel. That's a prayer. I've won battles on worse. Marcus turned back to them. But I need something from you first. Both of you. Name it. The truth about Sarah. Everything you know. Because when I face Vance, I need to understand exactly what I'm fighting for. Father Brennan and Rosa exchanged a look. Then the priest stood, pulled an envelope from his desk drawer. The paper was yellowed, the writing faded but still legible. Your wife left this with me the last time I saw her. Made me promise to give it to you if anything happened to her. He held it out. I'm sorry, Marcus. I should have given it to you sooner, but I thought you'd have enough grief without adding this to it. Marcus took the envelope with shaking hands. Sarah's handwriting on the front, neat and precise. For Marcus, if I don't survive. He opened it. The letter was 3 pages long, written in the careful detail of an attorney building a case. Sarah had discovered the trafficking pipeline through one of her ICE cases, a young girl from Guatemala who'd gone missing during processing. Sarah had started digging, following the trail back through a network of shell companies and offshore accounts, all the way to Harrison Vance. She'd documented everything. The financial transactions, the forged documents, the list of buyers, including a senator, 2 judges, and a CEO whose name Marcus recognized from the news. She'd been 2 weeks away from taking it to the FBI when she started feeling sick. The final paragraph burned itself into Marcus's brain. Marcus, if you're reading this, then Vance found out about my investigation. I've hidden copies of all my evidence in 3 locations. One in our home, behind Emma's baby photos in the basement. One in a safety deposit box at First National Bank, key taped under the bottom drawer of my desk. And one with Father Brennan. I'm sorry I kept this from you. I was trying to protect you and Emma. I love you both more than life itself. Please, if I'm gone, finish this fight for me. For all the children who can't fight for themselves, with all my love, Sarah. Marcus read the letter 3 times, then carefully folded it and put it in his pocket. When he looked up, his eyes were dry, but his hands were steady, in a way they hadn't been since he'd fallen into that canyon. The evidence, he said to Brennan. You have it? In the church safe. Everything Sarah compiled, plus what I've added in the 3 years since. The priest's expression was solemn. It's enough to bring down Vance's entire network, but it's also a death sentence for anyone who tries to use it. Vance has people everywhere. The moment you go public with this, you become a target. I'm already a target. Emma's already a target. Marcus stood straighter despite the pain in his leg. The question is whether we die as victims or as warriors. Rosa smiled for the first time since she'd walked into the room. I like this plan. It has a certain beautiful stupidity to it. That's what my Delta Force commander used to say. Marcus held out his hand. Are you with me? Rosa took his hand in a grip that was probably stronger than his in his current condition. To the end, Colonel. For Anna, for Emma, for all of them. Father? Brennan clasped Marcus's hand with both of his own. I'm a priest. I'm supposed to counsel forgiveness and peace. But I'm also Irish, and we believe in settling debts. His smile was wolf-sharp. Let's go to war. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Rosa brought weapons from caches hidden throughout the border region. An M4 rifle, the kind Marcus had carried through Iraq and Afghanistan. A Glock 19, smaller than his usual SIG, but reliable. Spare magazines, body armor, medical supplies, everything a small team would need to run a covert operation against a fortified position. Father Brennan provided intelligence. Maps of the compound showing guard rotations, camera positions, blind spots in the security coverage. The schedule of Vance's visits, the location of the room where Emma was being held. And Rosa brought her network. 23 people, most of them civilians, but all of them committed to the cause. Doctors, mechanics, truck drivers, a former Border Patrol agent named Jackson, who'd quit after finding out Vance was using agency resources for trafficking. A hacker named Yuki, who could disable security systems remotely. It wasn't an army, but it was something. By evening, Marcus stood outside the church watching the sun set over the desert, his body aching but his mind clear for the first time in days. Behind him, Rosa and Brennan were coordinating final details with the network. A vehicle approached from the east, kicking up dust. Marcus's hand moved to his weapon before he recognized the beat-up pickup truck. It pulled to a stop in front of the church, and a man climbed out who made Marcus's heart skip. Rafael Cordero, El Lobo, the Wolf. Marcus knew that name, knew the reputation. Cordero was cartel, one of the most feared enforcers in the Sonora region. The man had killed more people than Marcus could count, and most of those deaths had been brutal enough to make even hardened soldiers sick. Cordero looked at Marcus with eyes that held no mercy and no illusion. Then he spoke in heavily accented English. Colonel Shepard, I am told you are going to war with Harrison Vance. Marcus's weapon stayed in its holster, but his body was coiled and ready. And if I am, then I am here to help you. Cordero pulled something from his pocket, a photograph worn and creased from handling. My son, Miguel, 16 years old, Vance took him 3 months ago, has him at the compound with your daughter. Marcus looked at the photo, a teenage boy with Cordero's features, smiling at the camera, wearing a high school soccer jersey. I don't understand, Marcus said. Why would Vance take your son? Aren't you cartel? I am cartel, yes. I have done terrible things, killed men, women, anyone my boss has ordered dead. Cordero's voice was flat, empty of emotion. But Miguel is my son. When he told me he was gay, I said things. Terrible things. He ran away, tried to cross to America to find his mother's family. Vance's people found him at the border. And Vance is using him as leverage against you. Vance owns many people through their children, Colonel. That is his true power, not guns or money, but the ability to make men do anything to protect what they love. Cordero met Marcus's eyes. I will help you destroy him, and in return, you help me save my son. Marcus thought about Emma, about Miguel, about all the children Vance had taken and twisted into weapons against their own families. About Sarah's letter and the evidence she'd died protecting. All right, he said, but understand something. I'm going into that compound for Emma. If we can save Miguel too, we will. But if I have to choose between your son and my daughter, I choose Emma every time. As a father should. Cordero extended his hand. We understand each other, then. They shook on it. Two men who'd killed more people than they could count, making a deal sealed in blood and desperation and the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, they could save what little good remained in their broken worlds. That night, Marcus broadcast on the emergency channel he knew Vance monitored. His voice was weak, pain-threaded, exactly how a man dying from infected wounds would sound. This is Colonel Marcus Shepard to Commander Harrison Vance. I know you can hear me. I know you have my daughter. I'm at the old mining camp 20 miles east of the border. I'm injured, dying probably. But I want to make a deal. My life for Emma's. You let her go, I'll tell you where Sarah hid her evidence. Everything she found, every name on her list. He paused, letting the silence stretch. You have 12 hours. After that, I'll be dead, and the evidence goes to the FBI. Your choice, Harrison. Let Emma go and win, or keep her and lose everything. Marcus ended the transmission and looked at the people gathered around him in the church. Rosa, Brennan, Cordero, Jackson, and the others from the network. His army of broken, desperate people united by grief and rage and love. He'll come, Marcus said. Vance won't be able to resist. The evidence terrifies him more than I do. And when he comes, Rosa asked? Then we teach him that dead men don't stay buried, not when they have something worth fighting for. Outside, the desert night settled over the borderlands like a shroud. Somewhere to the north, Emma was alone and afraid in a room with locked doors and armed guards. Somewhere close, Vance was gathering his forces for one final strike against the man who wouldn't die. The war was coming, and Marcus Shepard intended to be ready. The old mining camp looked exactly how Marcus remembered it from training exercises 5 years back. Skeletal structures of rusted metal and rotting timber, tunnels that went down into darkness and maybe never came back up, and enough shadows to hide an army or to die alone in. The kind of place where echoes lied and every sound could be a threat or just the wind playing games with abandoned dreams. Marcus set up his position in what used to be the foreman's office. A concrete shell with windows facing 3 directions and one exit that led to the mine shaft. Tactically defensible if you had a team. A death trap if you were alone, which was exactly what Vance needed to believe. He checked his watch. 8 hours since the broadcast. 4 hours until his self-imposed deadline. Vance would come before then, would want the advantage of darkness and surprise. Would bring enough firepower to level the entire camp if necessary. The question was how many men he'd bring, and how many that would leave guarding Emma. Marcus's radio crackled. Rosa's voice barely a whisper. We're in position, north side of the compound, in the drainage tunnel Brennan mapped. Waiting for your signal. Copy. How many guards can you see? Thermal imaging shows 12 on the perimeter. Probably another 20 inside. A pause. Marcus, those are not good odds. They'll get worse when Vance pulls half of them to come kill me. Marcus adjusted the M4 rifle, checking the magazine for the 10th time. You have 90 minutes from the time they leave. Get Emma and Miguel out, then run. Don't wait for me. Colonel, if you die here, who's going to testify about the evidence? Sarah already testified. She wrote it all down. Father Brennan has copies, you have copies, and I've set up a dead man's switch with a journalist friend. If I don't check in every 12 hours, everything goes to the FBI and every major news outlet. Marcus smiled grimly. Vance thinks he's hunting me for the evidence. Really, I'm just the bait to draw him out of his fortress. Rosa was quiet for a moment. Your wife was a smart woman. She was the smartest person I ever met. And I'm going to make sure the world knows what she died for. He ended the transmission and settled in to wait. The desert night was cold. The kind of cold that got into your bones and reminded you that nature didn't care about your plans or your pain. Marcus's leg throbbed despite the antibiotics, and he could feel fever building again. Infection spreading, his body trying to die despite his stubborn refusal to let it. Emma needed him alive, so alive he'd stay. The first sign of movement came at 0200 hours. Marcus spotted it through his night vision. A heat signature detaching from the desert and moving toward the camp with the careful precision of trained soldiers. Then another, and another. 12 men total, approaching from 4 directions in a classic encirclement pattern. Vance had brought a kill team. Marcus keyed his radio. Rosa, they're here. 12 contacts moving to surround my position. How's the compound looking? Guard presence just dropped by half. They're mobilizing vehicles, probably backup for the team hitting you. Rosa's voice was tense. We're going in. God be with you, Marcus. And with you. He switched frequencies, found the tactical channel Vance's men were using. Listened to their chatter as they closed in. Team 1 in position, west approach. Team 2 set, north side. Team 3 ready. Still no movement from target. Then a voice Marcus knew too well. Commander Harrison Vance, probably watching from a command vehicle somewhere safe and distant. All teams, weapons free. I want confirmation of death. No chances this time. Sir, what if he has the evidence on him? Then retrieve it after you put 3 rounds in his skull. Move in. Marcus counted to 3, then triggered the first surprise. The claymore mine he'd buried at the west approach detonated with a sound like God's own thunderclap. The blast lit up the night, and Marcus heard screaming, men yelling about casualties and ambush. He didn't wait for them to regroup. The second mine went off 10 seconds later at the north approach, and then the third at the east. 3 of Vance's 4 teams were now combat ineffective, dead or wounded or scattered. The 4th team, approaching from the south, broke radio silence. Contact! We're taking fire! Except they weren't. Marcus hadn't shot at them. But panic was contagious in combat, especially when your buddies were dying and you couldn't see the enemy. All teams, fall back and regroup. That was Vance, and Marcus could hear the fury in his voice. He's mined the entire approach. We need EOD reinforcements. Marcus smiled in the darkness. Reinforcements meant pulling more men from the compound. Meant Rosa and her people had more time, better odds. He grabbed his rifle and moved, abandoning the foreman's office for a position deeper in the mine complex. Let Vance waste time securing a position he'd already left. Every minute Vance spent hunting a ghost was a minute Emma got closer to freedom. The tunnels went down into earth that smelled like copper and old explosions. Marcus's night vision turned the darkness into shades of green, showing him support beams that had been rotting since before he was born. Water dripped somewhere in the deep, a metronome counting seconds in a place where time had stopped mattering decades ago. He found a junction point, 3 tunnels meeting in a small cavern, set up his rifle covering the main approach. Then he waited. The radio crackled again, but this time it was a voice he wasn't expecting. Captain Ryan Cole, the man who'd betrayed him, who'd put a bullet in his armor and left him for dead. Marcus, I know you can hear me. Vance wants to make a deal. Marcus didn't respond. Let Cole talk to silence. We have Emma. She's alive, unharmed. But Vance is losing patience. He'll kill her if you don't surrender. A pause. This isn't personal, Colonel. It's just business. Give us the evidence, and we'll let you both walk away. It was a lie. Marcus knew it was a lie. But the venom in Cole's voice when he mentioned Emma made Marcus's blood run cold. The captain was young, ambitious, and utterly without conscience. Exactly the kind of man who'd hurt a 17-year-old girl to prove a point. Marcus keyed his radio, let Cole hear his voice. You touch my daughter, Ryan, and there won't be a hole deep enough for you to hide in. There he is, Cole laughed, triumphant. Vance, I've got him on comms. He's still in the mine complex. Vance's voice came back, cold and measured. Marcus, this ends one way. You know that. I taught you better than to think you can win against superior numbers. You taught me a lot of things, Harrison. How to lead, how to fight, how to tell the difference between a soldier and a murderer. Marcus moved while he talked, changing positions, making it harder for them to triangulate his location. Guess which one you turned into? I turned into a realist. The world doesn't care about idealism, Marcus. It cares about power, control. I took children who were going to die in the desert anyway and gave them value. Gave them to people who could afford to treat them well. You sold them like cattle. I gave them a chance at life, more than they'd have gotten dying of thirst in the Sonora. Vance's voice held no shame, no regret. Sarah understood that. She was going to destroy a system that saved lives. So I stopped her. The casual admission hit Marcus like a punch. You murdered my wife. I eliminated a threat to an operation that feeds, clothes, and shelters 300 children per year. Children who would otherwise be dead. So yes, I killed Sarah, and I'd do it again. Marcus's finger tightened on the trigger, even though there was no target. Just the radio and Vance's voice and the rage that threatened to overwhelm tactical thinking. Where's Emma? Marcus forced the words through gritted teeth. Safe, for now. Surrender and she stays that way. Keep fighting and Cole has orders to make her suffer before she dies. Your choice, Marcus. Be a hero and lose everything, or be a father and save your daughter. It was the choice Vance wanted him to make. The trolley problem made flesh. Save Emma and let Vance's network continue destroying hundreds more, or fight for justice and watch his daughter die. Marcus closed his eyes and saw Sarah's face. Remembered her last words in the hospital. Protect Emma. Promise me. He'd promised. And he intended to keep that promise. All right, Marcus said into the radio. I'm coming out. Tell your men to hold fire. Smart man, exit the mine, hands up, weapon on the ground. Do exactly as I say and Emma lives. Marcus started moving toward the mine entrance, his pace slow, deliberate. Behind him, deeper in the tunnels, he left his rifle propped against the support beam with a tripwire connected to the trigger. Anyone following him down would get a surprise. He emerged from the mine into the pre-dawn darkness. Floodlights blazed to life, blinding even through his closed eyelids. Marcus raised his hands, stood still, and waited for the inevitable. Footsteps approached from multiple directions. Rough hands grabbed him, forced him to his knees. Someone kicked his bad leg and Marcus screamed despite himself. The pain, white-hot and absolute. "Easy," Vance's voice, close now. "We need him alive to access the evidence." Marcus opened his eyes. Vance stood in front of him wearing tactical gear, but staying well back from any potential threat. Older now than Marcus remembered. Gray at the temples, lines around the eyes. But still the same man who'd carried him out of Fallujah, who'd recommended him for Delta Force, who'd been like a second father before he became something else entirely. "Hello, Marcus. You look terrible. You look like a man who murders sick women, so I'd say we're even." Vance's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Where's the evidence? Sarah's files, the offshore account records, everything she compiled. Where is it?" "Safe deposit box, First National Bank in Tucson. Key is hidden in my house." Marcus met Vance's gaze. "Let Emma go, and I'll tell you exactly where. Or I could torture you until you tell me, then kill you both anyway." Vance pulled out a knife, tested the edge against his thumb. "I'm trying to be civilized here, Marcus, but my patience has limits. So does mine." The explosion came from inside the mine, exactly on schedule. Marcus had set a timer on the tripwire, knew to the second when it would detonate. The blast brought down part of the tunnel entrance, sending rock and dust billowing into the night. In the confusion, Marcus moved. His hands weren't actually restrained, just held by guards who'd gotten comfortable. He grabbed the nearest guard's sidearm, twisted, fired 3 rounds before anyone could react. 2 guards down, the third diving for cover. Marcus ran despite his legs screaming, dove behind a rusted mining truck, and kept shooting. Not to win. He couldn't win against this many, just to buy time. Because while Vance had been monologuing, while Marcus had been playing the defeated soldier, Rosa and her people had been moving through that drainage tunnel under the compound, had been climbing stairs and cutting locks and getting closer to Emma with every second Vance wasted on his vendetta. Marcus's radio crackled. Rosa's voice tense but controlled. "We have them, Emma and Miguel, heading to Extraction Point Alpha." Relief hit Marcus so hard he nearly dropped his weapon. Emma was safe. That was all that mattered. "Colonel, what's your status?" Rosa asked. "Complicated. Get them out of here. Don't wait for me." "Marcus, we're not leaving you." "That's an order, Rosa. Get my daughter to safety. That's all I care about." He ended the transmission before she could argue. Bullets chewed the metal above his head, sparks flying. Vance's men were recovering from their surprise, organizing a proper response. In about 30 seconds, they'd have him surrounded again. Marcus checked his ammunition. 4 rounds left. Not enough. A voice called out from the darkness. "Not Vance this time, Captain Cole." "Colonel, you're done. Throw out your weapon and we'll make this quick." "Not really my style, Ryan." "Then I guess we do this the hard way." Cole's voice moved, circling. "You know, I almost respected you. Delta Force legend, the man who survived Fallujah. But look at you now. Broken leg, surrounded, no backup. All for what? A daughter who's probably already dead?" The lie was meant to break him. Marcus didn't let it. "Emma's alive. Your failure to secure her is probably why Vance is going to kill you after he kills me." Silence. Then Cole's voice, uncertain. "What are you talking about?" "Check your compound. Emma's gone. My people grabbed her while you were all here playing soldier." Marcus smiled in the darkness. "You got outmaneuvered by a priest and a truck driver. How's that going to look on your performance review?" He heard radio chatter, urgent and confused. Heard Vance screaming orders. Heard the moment they realized Emma wasn't where they'd left her. "Find her! Lock down the compound! Nobody leaves!" Vance's voice was losing its control, panic bleeding through. Marcus used the confusion to move again, crawling behind a concrete barrier. His leg was bleeding again, the splint coming apart. Every movement was agony, but Emma was free. Miguel was free. The mission was accomplished. Now he just had to survive long enough to see his daughter again. The radio crackled one more time. A new voice. Father Thomas Brennan, speaking with the calm certainty of a man who'd fought his own wars long ago. "Commander Vance, this is Father Brennan from St. Christopher's Church. I'm calling to inform you that Emma Shepard and Miguel Cordero are now in FBI custody, along with 3 other children we extracted from your compound. And all of Sarah Shepard's evidence has been transmitted to the Phoenix field office, the Justice Department, and 6 major news organizations. Vance's response was a howl of pure rage. Brennan continued, implacable. You're done, Harrison. Your network is exposed. Your clients are going to abandon you, and every law enforcement agency in the Southwest is converging on your location. I'd suggest surrender, but I suspect Colonel Shepard has other plans. The radio went dead. In the silence that followed, Marcus could hear Vance's breathing, harsh and rapid. The breathing of a man watching his empire collapse in real time. Marcus, Vance's voice was different now, hollow. You've destroyed everything. Years of work, billions in assets, all gone. Good. The children I saved, the ones I protected from worse fates. What happens to them now? They get justice, they get therapy, they get a chance to be children again instead of commodities. Marcus gripped his weapon tighter. And you get what you deserve. I deserve a medal. I built a system that worked. You built a machine that ate children, and Sarah died trying to stop it. So yeah, Harrison, you're getting exactly what you deserve. Vance stepped into view, weapon raised, not hiding behind his men anymore. Just 2 old soldiers facing each other across the ruins of trust and honor. I saved your life in Fallujah, Vance said. I know. I recommended you for every promotion, every commendation. I made you who you are. I know that too. Then why, Marcus? Why destroy me? Because you killed my wife, and because some things matter more than gratitude. They stood there in the gray light of approaching dawn, 2 men who'd been brothers in arms now facing each other as enemies. Behind Vance, Marcus could see his remaining men taking positions. 10, maybe 12 shooters, more than enough to end this. But Marcus had one advantage they didn't know about, one final card to play. Rafael Cordero stepped out of the shadows behind Vance's men, flanked by 4 of his cartel soldiers. Their weapons were already raised, already aimed. Commander Vance, Cordero said quietly, you took my son, threatened him to keep me under control. This was a mistake. Vance spun, realized he was surrounded. His men tried to react, but Cordero's people were faster. Professional. They'd been killing for money since before most of Vance's contractors learned to shave. Stand down, Vance ordered his men. All of you, weapons down. Sir, we can take them. I said stand down. Vance's voice cracked. It's over. The weapons lowered slowly, reluctantly. Marcus stepped out from cover, limping badly, his leg leaving a trail of blood. He should have felt triumphant, should have felt the rush of victory. Instead, he just felt tired. Colonel Shepard, Cordero nodded to him. Miguel is safe. Your people got him out. For this, I owe you a debt. We're even. Marcus kept his weapon trained on Vance. Take your men and go. This is between me and him. Cordero studied Marcus for a long moment, then nodded. Kill him clean. He deserves that much for being a worthy enemy. The cartel soldiers melted back into the desert, taking Vance's men with them as prisoners. Collateral for future negotiations, probably. Marcus didn't care. He had what he wanted. Vance stood alone now, his weapon holstered, his hands at his sides. So what now, Marcus? You execute me in cold blood? That's not who you are. You don't know who I am anymore. Marcus raised his weapon. You killed Sarah. You tried to kill Emma. You destroyed hundreds of families. Give me one reason why I shouldn't end this right now. Because I'm not the disease, Marcus. I'm just a symptom. Vance's voice was calm now, almost serene. You can kill me, but the network continues. There are 5 more people ready to take over the moment I'm gone. The clients still exist. The demands still exist. Killing me changes nothing. Maybe, but it'll make me feel better. Will it? Vance smiled sadly. Will it bring Sarah back? Will it erase Emma's trauma? Will it undo any of the damage I've caused? Marcus's finger tightened on the trigger. 1 pound of pressure. That's all it would take. One squeeze and Harrison Vance would stop breathing, stop scheming, stop destroying lives. But Vance was right about one thing. Killing him wouldn't bring Sarah back. The sound of helicopters approaching made the decision for him. Federal helicopters, judging by the markings. FBI probably, coming to secure the scene and arrest everyone in sight. Looks like you're going to face justice after all, Marcus said. There is no justice. Just people with power deciding who gets punished. Vance looked at the approaching helicopters. But I suppose it's fitting. I spent my life controlling narratives. Now I become one. The helicopters landed, kicking up dust and debris. Armed agents poured out, weapons raised, shouting commands. Marcus lowered his weapon, raised his hands, and let them swarm over him. An FBI agent, a woman in her 40s with hard eyes and a no-nonsense expression, approached him. Colonel Marcus Shepard? Yes. I'm Special Agent Catherine Wells. We have Emma. She's safe. The relief was so intense Marcus nearly collapsed. Where is she? Medical facility in Tucson. Physically unharmed, but she's been through trauma. She's been asking for you. Wells gestured to a medic. Get him patched up, and someone arrest Commander Vance. We have about 8 different agencies that want to talk to him. As the medics worked on Marcus's leg, he watched Vance being led away in handcuffs. The older man turned back once, met Marcus's eyes. I'm sorry, Vance said, about Sarah, about all of it. I thought I was saving the world. Turns out I was just damning myself. Then he was gone, loaded into a helicopter that lifted into the dawn sky. Agent Wells sat down next to Marcus as the medics worked. We've been tracking Vance for 2 years. Never had enough evidence to move. Then Father Brennan sent us everything, Sarah's files, offshore accounts, client lists, everything. She paused. Your wife was a hell of an investigator, Colonel. She was a hell of everything. The evidence she compiled will bring down one of the largest trafficking networks in North America. 47 arrests so far, including a senator and 2 federal judges. More coming. Wells's expression softened slightly. She didn't die for nothing. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the desert sun on his face for the first time in days. I need to see Emma. We'll get you there. But Colonel, you need to know something. Wells's voice was careful. Emma's the one who triggered the final evidence release. When your dead man's switch didn't activate on schedule, she found Father Brennan's copies and sent them herself. Your daughter saved dozens of children last night. Pride and terror warred in Marcus's chest. Emma, 17 years old, traumatized and terrified, had still found the strength to fight back. She was Sarah's daughter through and through. That's my girl, Marcus whispered. The helicopter ride to Tucson took 30 minutes. Marcus spent it staring out the window at the desert passing below, thinking about Sarah, about Jimmy Ortega dying in that canyon, about Danny Reeves who'd never made it out of the ambush. So many dead, so many sacrifices. But Emma was alive, and Vance's network was burning. Sometimes the cost was worth it. The hospital hallway smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. Marcus limped through it on crutches, his leg now properly splinted and stitched, following Agent Wells to a private room at the end. She stopped at the door. 5 minutes, then the doctors want her to rest. She's been through a lot. Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Wells opened the door and stepped aside. Emma was sitting up in bed, her dark hair tangled, bruises on her wrists where zip ties had held her. But her eyes were clear and fierce and alive. Dad? Marcus crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, careful of her injuries, holding her like he'd never let go. I'm sorry, he whispered into her hair. I'm so sorry, Emma. I should have protected you. Should have seen it coming. You came for me. Emma's voice was muffled against his shoulder. You were dead and you still came for me. Nothing could stop me from getting to you. Nothing. They held each other while the sun rose over Tucson, while somewhere in federal custody, Harrison Vance was being processed and charged, while Rosa and Father Brennan were giving statements to a dozen different agencies. The world was changing around them, justice grinding forward with the inevitability of glaciers. But in that hospital room, it was just a father and daughter who'd survived the unsurvivable, holding on to each other and the fragile promise that maybe, just maybe, they could start to heal. Emma pulled back, finally wiping her eyes. Mom's evidence. It's really going to bring them all down? Every single one. Good. Emma's jaw set in that stubborn shepherd way. I want to testify. Against Vance. Against all of them. I want to finish what Mom started. Emma, you don't have to do that. You're 17. You've been through enough. I'm old enough to testify, and I'm Sarah Shepard's daughter. This is what she would have done. Emma met his eyes. What she did do, even knowing it would get her killed. Marcus saw Sarah in Emma's expression, heard her voice in their daughter's words. The same fierce determination that had made him fall in love 23 years ago. All right, and he said, we'll testify together for Sarah, for all of them. For all of them, Emma echoed. Outside the window, the desert stretched away to distant mountains, beautiful and harsh and unforgiving. Somewhere out there, Miguel Cordero was reuniting with his father. Somewhere, 47 children were being processed into protective custody, being given a chance at lives not defined by the men who tried to own them. And somewhere, Sarah Shepard's ghost was finally at rest, knowing the fight she'd started was being finished by the family she'd left behind. Marcus settled into the chair next to Emma's bed, his body finally acknowledging the damage it had taken. The doctors said he'd walk again, maybe without a limp if he did the physical therapy. The therapist said the trauma would fade, given time and proper care. Marcus didn't believe them. Some scars went too deep to ever fully heal. But as he sat there holding his daughter's hand, watching her drift off to sleep with something approaching peace on her face, Marcus Shepard allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt since Sarah died. Hope. It was fragile. It was probably foolish, but it was real. And sometimes that was enough. 2 months after the mining camp, Marcus Shepard stood in a federal courthouse in Phoenix wearing a suit that felt like a straitjacket. The physical therapy sessions had been brutal. 8 weeks of learning to walk again, to trust a leg held together with titanium pins, and the stubborn refusal of bone to accept that it should have stayed broken. His therapist, a former Army medic named Torres, had pushed him through exercises that made the mining camp firefight look like a vacation. The cane helped. Marcus hated it, hated the way it made him look old and broken, but his legs still couldn't handle a full day without support. The doctors said maybe another 6 months and he could ditch it. Maybe. The shoulder where he'd taken the bullet had regained most of its range of motion, but it would ache when it rained for the rest of his life. Small prices for keeping Emma alive. The courtroom was packed with journalists, federal prosecutors, and families of the 47 missing children whose faces had been on Father Brennan's wall. Marcus recognized some of them: the mother who'd lost her son in Juarez, the father who'd mortgaged his house trying to hire private investigators, the grandmother who'd spent 3 years calling every hospital and morgue between Tijuana and San Diego. They all looked at him with the same desperate hope, like he was supposed to be a hero, like winning one battle against Vance's network meant the war was over. Marcus knew better. The 2 months of recovery had taught him that some battles never ended. You just learned to keep fighting through the pain. Emma sat in the front row, flanked by Agent Wells and a victim advocate. She'd cut her hair short during those 2 months, a practical bob that made her look older than 17. Made her look like Sarah. She'd spent the recovery time working with Jennifer Ortiz, the prosecutor, preparing her testimony, learning to talk about the trauma without falling apart. She caught Marcus's eye and gave him a small nod. They'd been through 6 depositions together in the past 8 weeks, reliving the nightmare in sterile conference rooms while lawyers recorded every word. Emma had gotten stronger with each one. Marcus had watched his daughter transform from victim to witness to warrior. This was different. This was public. This was where Harrison Vance would face the families he'd destroyed. The bailiff's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. All rise. The Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison presiding. Everyone stood. Marcus used his cane, hating the necessity but accepting it. The judge entered, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and the kind of stern expression that suggested she'd seen every variety of human evil and hadn't been impressed by any of it. Be seated. Judge Morrison, settled behind the bench, surveyed the packed courtroom. We're here for the arraignment of Harrison James Vance on multiple counts of human trafficking, conspiracy, murder, and racketeering. Bailiff, bring in the defendant. The side door opened. Vance walked in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed in front of him. 2 months in federal custody had hollowed him out. The confident commander was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like resignation. Gray stubble covered his jaw, and his eyes held the knowledge that the game was over. His eyes found Marcus, held his gaze. There was no apology there, no regret, just a tired acknowledgement that they'd both lost something in the desert that night. The prosecutor, Jennifer Ortiz, stood. She'd spent the past 2 months building a case so airtight that Vance's lawyers had filed 14 motions to dismiss. All 14 had failed. Your Honor, the government is charging Mr. Vance with 73 counts of human trafficking, 12 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, including the murder of Sarah Shepard, and racketeering under the RICO statute. We're requesting remand without bail. Mr. Vance has considerable financial resources and poses a significant flight risk. Vance's lawyer, an expensive suit from Washington, D.C. named Philip Kramer, rose immediately. Your Honor, my client maintains his innocence on all charges. He's a decorated veteran, a former Army colonel with 30 years of service to this country. He deserves the presumption of innocence and reasonable bail. Judge Morrison's expression didn't change. Mr. Vance, do you understand the charges against you? Vance stood. Yes, Your Honor. How do you plead? A pause, long enough that Marcus felt the entire courtroom holding its breath. Not guilty, Your Honor. The courtroom erupted. Families shouting, crying, demanding justice. Judge Morrison's gavel cracked like a gunshot. Order! I will have order, or I'll clear this courtroom. She waited for silence. Mr. Vance, given the severity of the charges and the evidence presented, I'm remanding you to federal custody without bail. Trial date is set for 90 days from today. As the bailiffs led Vance away, he turned back one more time. Not to Marcus, to Emma. I'm sorry, he mouthed. Emma's face was stone. She didn't acknowledge him, didn't give him the satisfaction of her pain. 2 months of therapy and preparation had armored her against his manipulations. Marcus had never been more proud of his daughter. Outside the courthouse, the press swarmed. Cameras and microphones thrust at Marcus like weapons. Questions shouted over each other in a cacophony that made his head ache. Colonel Shepard, how does it feel to bring down a trafficking network? Will you testify at trial? What message do you have for other trafficking victims? Marcus pushed through without answering, leaning more heavily on his cane than he liked. Emma walked beside him, head up, ignoring the chaos. Agent Wells and 2 FBI escorts cleared a path to the waiting car. They were 20 feet from safety when a man broke through the police line. He was in his 30s, well-dressed, carrying a leather briefcase. Nothing about him screamed threat. But Marcus's instincts, honed by 2 decades of combat and sharpened by 2 months of hypervigilance during recovery, screamed warning. The man's hand came out of the briefcase holding a pistol. "This is for the commander," he shouted. Time slowed. Marcus saw the gun tracking toward Emma, saw her eyes go wide, saw Agent Wells reaching for her own weapon, but too slow, too far away. Marcus moved on pure instinct. The cane clattered to the pavement as he threw himself between the gun and his daughter. Felt the impact like being kicked by a mule, the bullet punching through his left shoulder, spinning him around. He hit the pavement hard. The 2 months of physical therapy undone in an instant as his healing leg twisted wrong beneath him. Heard Emma screaming. Heard gunshots as FBI agents took down the shooter. Felt blood spreading warm across his chest. The world started to go gray at the edges. Emma's face appeared above him, her hands pressing down on his wound, her voice distant like she was calling from the bottom of a well. "Dad! Dad, stay with me! Don't you dare die! Don't you dare!" Marcus tried to tell her he was fine, tried to say it was just a shoulder wound, he'd had worse. But his lungs weren't working right, and the darkness was closing in fast. The last thing he saw before consciousness left was Emma's face, and the terrible realization that he'd promised to protect her, and now he was bleeding out anyway. All the physical therapy wasted because he'd made the same choice he'd always make. Her life for his, every single time. Marcus woke to the smell of hospital disinfectant and the steady beep of monitors. His left shoulder felt like someone had driven a railroad spike through it and left it there to rust. Every breath was an exercise in pain management. Different pain than the leg. The leg was a dull, throbbing reminder of the mining camp. The shoulder was fresh fire, sharp and immediate. "You're awake." Emma's voice hoarse from crying or shouting or both. Marcus turned his head. Emma sat in a chair beside his bed, still wearing the clothes from the courthouse, now stained with his blood. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. She'd run out of tears. "Hey, sweetheart," Marcus's voice came out as a croak. "You okay? Am I okay? You just took a bullet for me and you're asking if I'm okay?" Emma stood, paced to the window. "The doctors said you're lucky. 2 inches to the right and it would have hit your heart. Another inch up and it would have severed your subclavian artery. You'd have bled out before the ambulance arrived. But I didn't." "But you could have." Emma spun back and now the tears were coming. "Dad, you can't keep doing this. You can't keep almost dying for me. We just spent 2 months getting you walking again. 2 months of watching you hurt through physical therapy, learning to trust that leg. And now this. I can't lose you too. I can't lose both of you." Marcus tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Emma was there in a second, helping him, adjusting the bed. When he was settled, he caught her hand. "Emma, look at me." He waited until her eyes met his. "I would take that bullet again. Every single time. Do you understand? You're my daughter. Protecting you isn't something I do. It's who I am. Even if it kills you, especially then." Emma collapsed into the chair, her head in her hands. The shooter was one of Vance's men. FBI identified him as Thomas Garrett, former Marine dishonorably discharged for assault. He's been on Vance's payroll for 6 years. Is he dead? No. FBI took him alive. He's already confessed to conspiracy to commit murder. Said Vance ordered the hit from jail. Emma looked up. Dad, Vance is still running his network from inside federal custody. He has people everywhere, lawyers, guards, probably prosecutors. We're not safe. Marcus absorbed this. He'd known the network was deep, had tentacles in every level of government and law enforcement. But he'd hoped that with Vance in custody, the threat would diminish. He'd been naive. Again, what did Agent Wells say? That we're being moved to protective custody, undisclosed location, 24-hour security detail, until the trial. Emma's jaw set. I told her no. Emma, no, Dad, I'm not hiding. Mom didn't hide when she was investigating Vance. She kept fighting even when she knew it would get her killed. I'm not going to dishonor her memory by running. Sarah would want you alive more than she'd want you brave. Sarah would want me to finish what she started. Emma stood again, that restless energy needing an outlet. I've been talking to Jennifer Ortiz, the prosecutor. She says my testimony is crucial. I can testify about what Vance's men did, how the network operates. But if I'm in protective custody, I can't help build the case. I can't interview other victims. I can't do anything except hide. Marcus studied his daughter. When had she stopped being a child and become this fierce warrior woman? Somewhere between Sarah's death and her own kidnapping, Emma had transformed. She'd found her purpose. And Marcus couldn't protect her from it any more than he could protect her from growing up. All right, he said quietly. No protective custody. But we do this smart. We work with the FBI. We don't take unnecessary risks, and if I say run, you run. Deal? Emma's smile was pure Sarah. Deal. The door opened. Agent Wells entered, followed by a man Marcus didn't recognize. 50s, gray suit, the kind of unremarkable face that was probably an asset in his line of work. Colonel Shepard, glad to see you're awake. Wells gestured to the man. This is Deputy Director Frank Morrison from the FBI's Human Trafficking Task Force. He needs to speak with you about Harrison Vance. Morrison pulled up a chair, moving carefully like a man who understood that hospital rooms were places of pain. Colonel, I'll be direct. We have a problem. In the 2 months since Vance's arrest, we've made 47 arrests based on the evidence your wife compiled. But we've also seen a dramatic increase in trafficking activity in the Southwest region. Vance's network filling the vacuum, Marcus said. Worse, we believe there's someone else, someone who was working with Vance but stayed hidden, a silent partner who's now taking over operations. Morrison pulled out a tablet, showed Marcus surveillance photos. These are from the last 8 weeks. Shipments moving through routes we hadn't identified before, new safe houses, a completely separate pipeline. Marcus studied the images. Different locations, different vehicles, but the same underlying pattern. Children being moved like cargo. Who's running it? He asked. We don't know. Vance isn't talking. But whoever it is, they're good. Better than Vance, maybe. They've avoided every surveillance operation we've run. It's like they know where we're looking and move around us. Emma leaned forward. What about the evidence Mom compiled? Weren't there other names on her list? 47 names. We've arrested or identified all of them. Morrison's expression was grim, but there are references in Sarah's notes to a primary client who she never named. Someone she was still investigating when she died. Someone powerful enough that even mentioning them scared her. Marcus felt ice forming in his chest. Sarah had been fearless. For her to be afraid of someone meant they were beyond dangerous. Show me her notes, he said. Morrison pulled up scanned documents on the tablet. Sarah's handwriting, precise and careful. Marcus recognized her style immediately, the way she built cases like a mason laying bricks, each piece of evidence supporting the next. He read through page after page of financial transactions, shipping manifests, coded communications. And then he saw it. A single line in Sarah's notes underlined 3 times. Primary client, Victoria Keene, Deputy Director, ICE, unable to confirm. Need more evidence before approach. The room tilted. Marcus gripped the bed rail to steady himself. Victoria Keene, the woman who'd been at his own funeral, who'd delivered the eulogy with tears in her eyes talking about his dedication to service, who'd sent flowers to the house and called Emma to offer condolences, who was the number 3 official at Immigration and Customs Enforcement, with authority over every border crossing, every detention facility, every processing center in the Southwest. Keene, Marcus whispered. Morrison nodded grimly. We've been watching her for 8 weeks. Can't find anything concrete. She's careful. But the pattern fits. Every time we move on one of the new trafficking routes, she has a meeting the day before. Every shipment that gets through, she was in the region. She's either the unluckiest law enforcement official in history or she's actively protecting the network. Have you confronted her? Can't. She's too connected. We need proof that would hold up in court, not just suspicious timing. Morrison leaned back. That's why I'm here, Colonel. We need you to help us get that proof. Emma's hand found Marcus's uninjured shoulder. Dad, you just got shot. You can't be thinking about going after another one of these monsters. I'm not going after her. Marcus met Morrison's eyes. You want me as bait again. Draw her out. Make her think I'm a threat she needs to eliminate. In essence, yes, but with proper protection this time. Full FBI surveillance, wiretaps, the works. Morrison's expression was serious. I won't lie to you, Colonel. This is dangerous. If Keene is who we think she is, she's been running this network for longer than Vance. She's smarter, more connected, and more ruthless. But she's also getting desperate. With Vance's trial approaching, she knows evidence might surface that connects her. If we can make her move against you, we can catch her in the act. Marcus thought about Sarah, dying slowly from poison while Vance and Keene watched. Thought about the 47 children on Brennan's wall. Thought about Emma, who wanted to fight but needed her father alive to have any chance of surviving this war. His shoulder throbbed. His leg ached. 2 months of physical therapy would have to start over. Torres was going to be furious. What's the play? He asked. Morrison smiled. We leak information that you have additional evidence Sarah left behind. Something that names Keene specifically. Make it loud enough that she can't ignore it. Subtle enough that she believes it. And when she comes for me, we'll be ready. Full protection. But Colonel, I need you to understand, if this goes wrong, if Keene is as connected as we think, she might have people inside the FBI, inside our protection detail. You'd be trusting your life to a system that's already failed you once. Story of my career. Marcus looked at Emma. What do you think? Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she straightened, and Marcus saw Sarah in every line of her face. I think Mom spent 3 years building a case against these people. I think she died before she could finish it. And I think we owe it to her to end this. Emma's voice was steady. But I'm going with you, no arguments. If you're bait, I'm back up. Emma, absolutely not. Dad, I'm 17. In 8 months, I'll be at West Point, training to be a soldier just like you. You can either let me help now, or I'll do it anyway and you won't be there to protect me. Morrison looked between them. Actually, having Emma visible might help sell the deception. Keene knows about her. Having her with you makes it look like you're not expecting trouble. Makes you seem like an easier target. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to lock Emma in a safe room somewhere far from bullets and betrayal. But he looked at her face and knew he'd already lost this fight. Fine, he said, but you stay behind me at all times. You do exactly what the FBI says. And if shooting starts, you run. Understood? Understood. Morrison stood. We'll set it up for 3 days from now. Give you time to heal. Give us time to position our people. He paused at the door. Colonel, this might finally end it. Vance and Keene gone, the network dismantled, your wife's work completed. Or it might get us all killed. That too, Morrison left. Emma sat back down beside Marcus's bed. Dad, are you scared? Terrified. Good, that means you're thinking clearly. She took his hand. We're going to finish this. For Mom, for Jimmy and Danny, for all of them. Marcus squeezed her hand, feeling the calluses from her cross-country training, the strength in her grip. When did you get so brave? I had a good teacher. They sat in silence, father and daughter, preparing for one more battle in a war that had already cost them everything that mattered. Outside the hospital window, the Phoenix sunset painted the sky in shades of blood and fire. Somewhere in the city, Victoria Keene was making plans, moving pieces on a chessboard that had bodies instead of pawns. Somewhere, children were being loaded into trucks and vans and shipping containers, their futures measured in auction prices and client preferences. And somewhere, Sarah Shepard's ghost watched and waited for justice that was 3 years overdue. Marcus closed his eyes and made a silent promise to his dead wife. This ends. One way or another, this ends. The trap was set in a restaurant called the Desert Rose, an upscale place in Scottsdale where politicians and business executives made deals over wine that cost more than Marcus used to make in a week. The FBI had rented out the private dining room, installed cameras in the walls and microphones in the centerpieces. Agent Wells had a team positioned within 30 seconds of response time. It was as safe as they could make it, which meant it probably wasn't safe at all. Marcus sat at a table wearing a wire under his shirt, his shoulder still in a sling from the shooting 3 days ago. The doctors had cleared him for limited activity, said the bullet had missed everything vital. He'd heal given time. Time was the one thing they didn't have. Emma sat across from him, wearing a dress that Sarah had bought her for college interviews. She looked grown up, professional, nothing like the terrified girl who'd been held hostage 2 months ago. She looked like bait. Contact approaching, Wells's voice in Marcus's hidden earpiece. Victoria Keene just entered the restaurant. She's alone. Marcus's heart rate spiked. Emma caught his eye, gave him a barely perceptible nod. They were ready. Victoria Keene walked into the private dining room like she owned it. She was in her 50s, attractive in the way of women who had money for good skincare and better plastic surgeons. Her suit was tailored, her jewelry understated but expensive. She looked like someone's accomplished aunt, not the mastermind of a trafficking empire. Colonel Shepard, her smile was warm, genuine seeming. And Emma, I'm so glad you both agreed to meet with me. Deputy Director Keene, Marcus stood, shook her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. Thank you for coming. Of course. When you called about additional evidence in Sarah's case, I wanted to hear it directly. Keene sat down, declined the wine menu with a graceful wave. Just water, please. I want a clear head for this conversation. Emma poured water from the pitcher on the table, her hand steady. 2 months of preparation showing in every controlled movement. My mother respected you, Director Keene. She mentioned you several times in her notes. Sarah was brilliant. Her death was a tremendous loss to ICE. Keene's expression was perfectly sympathetic. I understand you found more of her research. Not found exactly. Marcus leaned back, watching her carefully. More like remembered. Sarah used to talk to me about her cases, especially near the end when she was working on the trafficking investigation. She mentioned someone she was afraid of, someone with enough power to make her disappear if they wanted to. Keene's smile didn't waver, but something shifted in her eyes, a sharpness, a calculation. Did she name this person? Not directly, but she left clues, financial transactions that all pointed to one source. Marcus pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Shell companies registered in Delaware. Money flowing through a network that looked legitimate on the surface, but was actually funding Vance's operation. Keene opened the folder, scanned the documents. They were real, carefully compiled by the FBI from Sarah's original evidence and recent surveillance. Real enough to be convincing. Real enough to scare someone with something to hide. This is impressive work, Keene closed the folder. But I'm not sure what it has to do with me. Every transaction flows through accounts that required ICE authorization to establish. Authorization that came from your office. Marcus watched her carefully. Sarah knew. That's why she was scared. That's why she died. The silence stretched for 5 long seconds. Keene sat perfectly still, her expression unreadable. Then she smiled. You're absolutely right, Colonel. Sarah did find something that scared her, and yes, it did come from my office. Keene's voice was calm, almost conversational, but not from me. She pulled out her own folder, slid it across to Marcus. I've been investigating corruption in ICE for 2 years. Sarah was helping me. We were building a case against my own deputy director, a man named Richard Strand. He was using his position to facilitate trafficking exactly as you described. Marcus opened the folder, saw documents, emails, financial records, all pointing to Richard Strand as the source of corruption. Sarah was killed because Strand found out she was investigating him. He arranged for poison to be introduced during her chemotherapy. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. Keene's voice carried real pain. I've been trying to finish her work ever since, trying to honor her sacrifice. Emma leaned forward. If that's true, why didn't you come forward after she died? Because Strand has protection. Connections that go all the way to Washington. If I'd moved too soon, he would have disappeared and the evidence with him. Keene met Emma's eyes. Your mother understood that. We agreed to wait until the case was airtight. Then she died, and I was left trying to finish it alone. It was a perfect story, believable, backed by documents that looked legitimate, and it put all the blame on someone else. Marcus didn't believe a word of it. Show me Strand, he said. Excuse me? You've been investigating him for 2 years. You must have surveillance, photos, something. Marcus kept his voice level. Show me the man who killed my wife. Keene hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Richard Strand doesn't exist, does he? Emma's voice cut through the room. You made him up. A paper trail leading nowhere. That's absurd. But Keen's smile was gone now. My mother was careful, meticulous. She documented everything. Emma pulled out her own phone, showed Keen the screen. These are her notes from 2 months before she died. She mentions investigating you specifically. Victoria Keen, primary client. Those were her exact words. Keen's expression went flat, cold, the mask dropping away to reveal something predatory underneath. You should have stayed dead, Colonel. Her hand moved to her purse. Marcus was faster. His good hand shot across the table, caught her wrist before she could draw whatever weapon she'd brought. FBI, freeze! The door burst open. Agent Wells and her team flooded in, weapons drawn. Victoria Keen, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, human trafficking, and racketeering. Put your hands on the table. Now. Keen didn't move, didn't struggle, just looked at Marcus with something like respect. Sarah was smarter than I gave her credit for. And so are you. She placed her hands flat on the table. It won't matter. I have people who will make this go away. Lawyers, judges, people you can't touch. Maybe? Marcus stood as the FBI cuffed her. But my wife taught me that sometimes justice isn't about the system. It's about making sure the truth gets told. He pulled out his phone, showed Keen the screen. A live stream broadcasting to every news outlet in the country. Every word of their conversation recorded and transmitted. 2 million people just watched you try to draw a weapon on a federal informant. Try making that go away. For the first time, a fear crossed Victoria Keen's face. As the FBI led her away, Emma moved to Marcus's side. We did it. We actually did it. Your mother did it. We just finished what she started. Agent Wells approached, allowing herself a small smile. That was good work, both of you. Keen's already asking for a lawyer, but with that footage going viral, no lawyer on earth can save her. What about her network? The people she has protecting her? Already moving on them. The moment Keen reached for her weapon, we activated arrest warrants across 6 states. By morning, we'll have 60 more in custody. Wells paused. It's over, Colonel. You won. Marcus looked at Emma, saw the exhaustion in her eyes that probably mirrored his own. Thought about Sarah, about Jimmy, about all the people who died to reach this moment. Nobody wins, he said quietly. We just survived. Outside the desert rose, news vans were already gathering. The story was everywhere. Victoria Keen's attempted murder caught on live stream. The hidden trafficking network exposed. Justice finally for Sarah Shepard and the 47 children whose faces had been on Brennan's wall. Marcus and Emma slipped out the back, avoiding the cameras, avoiding the questions that would come later. They sat in the FBI's unmarked car, watching the chaos through tinted windows. What happens now? Emma asked. Now we testify. At Vance's trial, at Keen's trial, we make sure they never hurt anyone else. And after that, Marcus took his daughter's hand. His shoulder throbbed. His leg ached even with the cane. 2 months of physical therapy hadn't been enough, and now he'd need more. But Emma was safe. Sarah's work was finished. After that, we tried to figure out how to live again. They drove through Phoenix as the sun set, painting the desert in familiar shades of fire and blood. Behind them, the restaurant filled with agents and evidence techs and the machinery of justice grinding forward. Ahead of them, an uncertain future where Sarah's ghost could finally rest and Emma could maybe, possibly learn to sleep without nightmares. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close to enough. But it was something. And sometimes Marcus thought as he watched his daughter's profile against the sunset, sometimes that had to be enough. 6 months after Victoria Keen's arrest, Marcus Shepard stood in Arlington National Cemetery watching snow fall on Jimmy Ortega's headstone. The white marble was new enough to still gleam, inscribed with Jimmy's rank, his dates of service, and a single line that Maria had chosen. He died bringing lost sheep home. Emma stood beside Marcus, her West Point acceptance letter folded in her coat pocket. She'd deferred enrollment for a year, said she needed time to heal before she could be a soldier. Marcus understood. Some wounds needed more than physical therapy to mend. Maria's doing okay, Emma said quietly, her breath fogging in the December cold. I talked to her yesterday. She started a foundation, using Jimmy's life insurance and the settlement from the FBI, helping families of trafficking victims. That sounds like something Jimmy would have wanted. She asked about you, wanted to know if you're sleeping better. Marcus didn't answer. The nightmares had lessened, but they hadn't stopped. Probably never would. You didn't walk away from what he'd seen, what he'd done, and sleep peacefully. That wasn't how it worked. They stood in silence, paying respects to a man who died because Marcus had asked him to. Another name on a list that was getting too long. Danny Reeves, Jimmy Ortega, Sarah Shepard, all the children whose faces had been on Father Brennan's wall who hadn't made it home. The trial starts tomorrow, Emma said. I know. You ready? No, but we're doing it anyway. They walked through the cemetery as snow continued to fall, covering the graves of soldiers and heroes and ordinary people who'd served their country in 1,000 different ways. Marcus's legs still ached, probably always would. The shoulder where he'd taken the bullet would never have full range of motion again. His body was a map of old wars and recent battles, scarred tissue and bones that had broken and healed wrong. But he was alive, Emma was alive, and tomorrow they would testify against Harrison Vance and Victoria Keene and help finish what Sarah had started 3 years ago. It was enough. It had to be enough. The federal courthouse in Phoenix was a fortress. Metal detectors, armed marshals, barriers to keep protesters and press at a safe distance. The trial had dominated news cycles for months. People had opinions, strong ones, about whether Vance and Keene would actually face justice or if their connections would save them. Marcus had stopped reading the news. He knew what he knew, had lived what he'd lived. The court of public opinion didn't matter. Only the 12 people in the jury box did. Emma walked beside him through the security checkpoint, her hand finding his for just a moment. She'd testified during pretrial hearings, had sat in depositions for hours while defense attorneys tried to break her story. She'd never wavered, never cracked. Sarah would have been so proud. The courtroom was packed. Marcus recognized faces from the mining camp raid. Rosa Delgado sat in the third row, her eyes hard as stone. Father Thomas Brennan was there in his clerical collar, looking like a warrior priest from medieval times. Rafael Cordero sat in the back, his son Miguel beside him. The boy looked healthier now, the hollowness gone from his eyes. And in the front row, surrounded by FBI agents, sat Maria Ortega with her 3 children, Jimmy's family. Come to see justice done for a man who died in the desert fighting monsters. Marcus took his seat at the prosecutor's table beside Jennifer Ortiz. She'd spent 6 months building this case, coordinating with federal prosecutors across 6 states, 73 witnesses, thousands of pages of evidence, a case so airtight that Vance's lawyers had tried 12 times to get it dismissed. All 12 attempts had failed. You ready for this? Ortiz asked quietly. As ready as I'll ever be. The bailiff's voice cut through the murmur. All rise. The Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison presiding. The judge entered, same stern expression Marcus remembered from the arraignment. She'd refused to recuse herself, despite defense motions, said she'd seen the evidence and found no reason why she couldn't be impartial. Marcus suspected she wanted to be the one to sentence these monsters personally. Be seated. Judge Morrison settled behind the bench. We're here for the trial of Harrison James Vance and Victoria Ann Keene. Bailiff, bring in the defendants. The side door opened. Vance entered first, wearing a suit instead of prison orange, his lawyers having won that small victory. He'd aged more in 6 months than in the previous decade. Gray hair had gone white. The confidence was gone, replaced by resignation. Keene came next. She'd maintained her composure better, still looked like a professional instead of a prisoner, but there was something brittle in her eyes, a knowledge that the game was over and she'd lost. They sat at separate defense tables, their lawyers having successfully argued conflict of interest. Vance wouldn't even look at Keene. The partnership that had destroyed so many lives had ended in mutual betrayal. Each blaming the other, each trying to save themselves. Neither would succeed. Judge Morrison addressed the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, this trial will likely last several weeks. You're going to hear testimony that will be difficult, disturbing, but I need you to focus on the facts, on the evidence, not on emotion. Can you do that? 12 heads nodded. Marcus studied them. 7 women, 5 men, ages ranging from 30s to 70s. A mix of races and backgrounds. People who'd been vetted extensively to ensure they had no connection to the case. People who held the power to end this nightmare or let it continue. Ms. Ortiz, you may begin, the judge said. The prosecutor stood, smoothed her suit jacket, and addressed the jury with a voice that carried steel wrapped in silk. Members of the jury, over the next several weeks, you're going to hear a story about 2 people who used their positions of power to destroy the most vulnerable among us. Children, immigrants, people who came to this country seeking safety and found only predators. She clicked a remote. A screen behind her lit up with a photograph. A young girl, maybe 10 years old, smiling at the camera. This is Ana Delgado. She died at age 12 in a shipping container at the port of Los Angeles. She'd been drugged to keep her docile while being transported to a buyer in Dubai. When the drug stopped, her body went into shock. She died 3 hours after being rescued. Another photo, a boy this time. This is Carlos Mendez, age 14, found dead in a desert wash near Nogales. He tried to escape from a trafficking convoy. His body showed signs of torture before death. More photos, more names, more children who'd been taken and destroyed by Vance and Keen's network. 47 children, 47 families destroyed, all because Harrison Vance and Victoria Keen saw an opportunity for profit. Ortiz turned to face the defendants. They will tell you they were helping these children, saving them from worse fates. They will claim noble intentions. She turned back to the jury. But the evidence will show you the truth. They were running a business where children were inventory and human suffering was acceptable as long as the profit margin stayed high. And they did this for years, protected by their positions, by their connections, by a system they'd corrupted from the inside. Ortiz paused, let the silence build. The evidence will show that Sarah Shepard, an ICE attorney, discovered this network, that she compiled documentation of every transaction, every client, every child who went through their pipeline, and that when she got too close to exposing them, Harrison Vance had her murdered. Poisoned slowly during chemotherapy for cancer, made to look like natural causes. Marcus felt Emma's hand find his under the table. He squeezed it gently. The evidence will show that when Colonel Marcus Shepard started investigating his wife's death, Vance sent him into an ambush, tried to kill him and his entire team. 2 men died in that ambush, good men, heroes. Ortiz pulled up another photo, Emma, sitting in that chair with her hands zip-tied, fear in her eyes. The evidence will show that Vance and Keen kidnapped Emma Shepard, age 17, to use as leverage against her father, that they held her in a compound alongside 60 other children who were being prepared for transport to buyers around the world. She turned off the screen, faced the jury directly. The defense will try to muddy the waters. They'll argue jurisdiction issues, chain of evidence, anything to avoid the central truth. But that truth is simple. Harrison Vance and Victoria Keen ran a criminal enterprise that bought and sold children. They murdered anyone who threatened that enterprise. And they would still be doing it today if not for the courage of 2 people. A dead woman who left evidence behind, and a father who refused to let his daughter become another statistic. Ortiz sat down. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of someone crying softly in the back. One of the victim's family members, probably. There would be a lot more tears before this was over. Vance's lawyer stood, a man named Philip Kramer from a Washington, D.C. firm that charged $1,000 an hour. Members of the jury, you're going to hear a lot of emotional appeals in this trial. Tragic stories, dead children. But I need you to focus on the law, on facts, not feelings. He paced in front of the jury box. Harrison Vance is a decorated veteran, 30 years of service to this country, 2 silver stars, a bronze star. He fought in Iraq, in Afghanistan, risked his life countless times to protect American interests. Is this the profile of a monster or of a man who dedicated his life to service? Kramer pulled up his own photos. Not dead children this time. Vance in uniform. Vance receiving medals. Vance shaking hands with presidents and generals. The prosecution wants you to believe that this man suddenly became a criminal, that he threw away 3 decades of honor to traffic children. But the evidence will show something different. It will show that Harrison Vance was conducting legitimate law enforcement operations, that he was investigating trafficking networks, not running them, that every action he took was authorized by his superiors and within the scope of his duties. Marcus felt rage building in his chest. The lies were audacious, insulting, but Kramer delivered them with such conviction that he could see some jurors wavering. Yes, children died. That's the tragedy of trafficking. It's an evil business run by evil people, but Harrison Vance was trying to stop it, not profit from it. The financial transactions the prosecution will present, those were part of an undercover operation. The communications with buyers, intelligence gathering. Everything has an explanation that doesn't require you to believe a decorated war hero suddenly became the villain. Kramer sat down, looking satisfied. Keen's lawyer stood next, a sharp woman named Rebecca Singh. Victoria Keen spent 23 years at ICE. Sao rose through the ranks on merit, developed policies that saved lives at the border. coordinated with international agencies to combat trafficking. Her record speaks for itself. Singh's approach was different than Kramer's. Less emotional, more technical. The prosecution will present evidence that appears damning, financial records, communications, but they won't tell you the context. They won't explain that deputy directors of ICE routinely authorize financial transactions for legitimate law enforcement purposes. They won't acknowledge that communications with criminal elements are part of intelligence operations. She faced the jury squarely. Victoria Keene is not on trial because she committed crimes. She's on trial because she was convenient, because the real criminals in this case needed a scapegoat when their network was exposed. Don't let them use you to persecute an innocent woman who spent her career fighting the very crimes she's accused of committing. The opening statement is ended. Judge Morrison called a recess. Marcus stood slowly, his legs stiff from sitting. Emma was pale, her jaw clenched. "They're going to lie their way out of this," she said quietly. "Aren't they?" "They're going to try." Outside the courtroom, Agent Wells found them. "First day is always the hardest. Defense attorneys plant doubt. But wait until we present evidence. Wait until you testify." "When do I take the stand?" Marcus asked. "Week 2, probably. After we've established the financial evidence and the communications records. You'll be the human face of what they did." Wells paused. "How are you holding up?" "I've been better." "You've also been worse." Wells smiled slightly. "You survived the desert, Colonel. You'll survive this too." The trial proceeded like a slow-motion avalanche. Day after day of testimony from FBI and forensic accountants explaining money laundering. From ICE agents describing how Keene had corrupted their systems. From Border Patrol officers who'd seen Vance's operation firsthand. Rosa Delgado testified about finding her daughter's body. Her voice never wavered, but Marcus could see the cost in her eyes, the wound that would never fully heal. Father Brennan testified about the Underground Railroad, about the 47 children whose faces had been on his wall, about Sarah Shepard coming to him with evidence she was too afraid to take to official channels. Rafael Cordero testified about his son Miguel being taken, about Vance using the boy as leverage to keep Cordero in line, to force him to provide cartel support for trafficking operations. Each witness added another brick to the prosecution's wall. Each piece of evidence made it harder for the defense to maintain their lies. But Vance and Keene's lawyers were good. They picked at details, found inconsistencies in dates and times, suggested alternative explanations for damning evidence. They couldn't destroy the prosecution's case, but they could muddy it, could make some jurors wonder if maybe there was reasonable doubt. Marcus watched it all from the gallery when he wasn't needed at the prosecution table. Watched the faces of the jury as they absorbed testimony about children being sold like livestock. Some looked angry, some looked sick. All of them looked like they wished they were anywhere else. He understood the feeling. On the 10th day of trial, Marcus was called to testify. He walked to the witness stand on a leg that would never fully heal, raised his right hand, and swore to tell the truth. As if truth mattered in a system where lawyers could twist facts until they resembled lies, and lies could be polished until they looked like truth. Jennifer Ortiz approached with a gentleness that seemed out of place in the courtroom's formality. "Colonel Shepard, please state your name and occupation for the record." "Marcus James Shepard, retired Border Patrol, formerly Delta Force." "You're married to Sarah Shepard, deceased?" "I was. She died 3 years ago." "And how did she die?" "Cancer. Officially." Marcus met Ortiz's eyes, but the evidence shows she was poisoned during her chemotherapy treatments. Vance's lawyer objected immediately. Judge Morrison overruled. The testimony continued. Ortiz led Marcus through the story. Sarah's investigation, the evidence she'd compiled, her death and the suspicious circumstances surrounding it, the mission Vance had sent Marcus on, the ambush, Jimmy and Danny dying in the desert, Emma being taken. Marcus kept his voice steady, kept his emotions contained. This was testimony, not therapy. The jury needed facts, not feelings. But he could see them reacting, could see the horror in their eyes as they understood what had been done. When Ortiz finished, Philip Kramer stood for cross-examination. "Colonel Shepard, you've been through a terrible ordeal. I think everyone in this courtroom can agree on that. But I need to ask you some difficult questions." "Ask." "You blame Harrison Vance for your wife's death. Is that correct?" "The evidence blames him. I'm just here to testify about it." "But you have a personal vendetta against my client. You want revenge for what happened to your family." "I want justice." "Justice or revenge, Colonel? Because from where I sit, they look very similar." Marcus took a breath, forced himself to stay calm. I want Harrison Vance held accountable for his crimes. If you want to call that revenge, that's your choice. I call it what the law demands. Kramer paced, building to something. Colonel, isn't it true that you were suffering from PTSD when these events occurred? That you were unstable, grieving, possibly delusional? Objection! Ortiz was on her feet, badgering the witness and assuming facts not in evidence. Sustained. Mr. Kramer, rephrase or move on. Kramer changed tactics. You claim my client sent you into an ambush. But isn't it possible you misinterpreted a legitimate law enforcement operation? That in your grief and anger, you saw conspiracy where there was only tragedy? I saw my teammate's body riddled with bullets. I heard Captain Cole admit to betrayal. I watched Harrison Vance try to kill me in that mining camp. Marcus's voice was steel. I didn't misinterpret anything. The cross-examination continued for 2 hours. Kramer tried every angle, suggested every alternative explanation. But Marcus had spent 28 years in the military, had been interrogated by experts, had learned how to stick to truth even when lies would be easier. When Kramer finally sat down, looking frustrated, Judge Morrison called for a lunch recess. Emma found Marcus at the hallway outside. You did great, Dad. I just told the truth. That's all Mom ever wanted, for the truth to come out. Emma paused. I testify tomorrow. You ready? No, but I'm doing it anyway. She smiled, and it was pure Sarah. Sound familiar? The next day, Emma took the stand wearing a simple blue dress and her mother's necklace. She looked young, vulnerable, exactly what she was. A 17-year-old girl who'd survived hell and come out scarred but unbroken. Ortiz led her through the testimony gently. The kidnapping, it being held in that room with Miguel and the other children. Overhearing Vance's men talk about the network, about buyers, about her father being hunted in the desert. Emma's voice never wavered. She spoke with a clarity that was devastating in its simplicity. No embellishment, no drama, just facts delivered by someone who'd lived through the nightmare. When Keene's lawyer cross-examined, trying to suggest Emma was confused or traumatized or unreliable, Emma simply repeated her testimony, word for word. Her memory was perfect, her certainty unshakable. Marcus watched his daughter testify and felt pride so intense it was almost painful. She was Sarah's legacy. The best parts of both of them combined into someone stronger than either had been alone. The trial continued for 3 more weeks. More witnesses, more evidence. The defense put on their case, called character witnesses who testified that Vance was a hero and Keene was dedicated public servant. Called experts who suggested alternative explanations for the evidence. But in the end, it came down to the simple truth. 47 dead children, millions of dollars in illegal transactions, a network that had operated for years under the protection of people who were supposed to stop it. The jury deliberated for 4 days. Marcus spent those days in a fog of anxiety and exhaustion. Emma was calmer, had the certainty of youth that right would prevail. Marcus had seen too much of the world to share that certainty. On the 4th day, word came. The jury had reached a verdict. The courtroom packed again. Same faces in the gallery, same quiet desperation from the victims' families. Marcus sat beside Emma. Their hands clasped, waiting for 12 strangers to decide if justice still meant anything. The jury filed in. None of them looked at the defendants. Marcus had been told that was a good sign, but he'd learned not to trust signs. Judge Morrison addressed the jury foreman. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. On the charge of human trafficking, how do you find the defendant, Harrison Vance? Guilty. The courtroom erupted. Judge Morrison's gavel cracked like thunder. Order! I will have order! The foreman continued it through 73 counts. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Each word another nail in Vance's coffin. Then Keene's verdict. Guilty on every count. Marcus felt Emma collapse against him, sobbing with relief. Around them, families of the victims were crying, hugging, releasing 3 years of anguish in a flood of tears and catharsis. Vance sat stone-faced at his table. Keene was crying, but silently, her composure finally cracking. They'd both gambled everything on the lies holding up. The lies had failed. Judge Morrison set sentencing for 2 weeks later. As the marshals led Vance and Keene away, Vance turned back one last time, not to Marcus, to Emma. I'm sorry, he said, for all of it. Then he was gone. The sentencing hearing was quieter than the verdict. Judge Morrison listened to impact statements from victims' families. Rosa spoke about Anna. Maria spoke about Jimmy. Miguel spoke about the months he'd spent in captivity, the scars that would never fully fade. Emma spoke last. My mother was Sarah Shepard. She was an attorney, a wife, a mother. She was the best person I ever knew. Emma's voice carried through the courtroom. Harrison Vance and Victoria Keene murdered her because she got too close to exposing their crimes. They tried to murder my father. They kidnapped me and dozens of other children. She paused, composed herself. I could hate them. Part of me does. But mostly I just feel sad. Sad that they used their power to destroy instead of protect. Sad that they chose profit over people. Sad that my mother died trying to stop them. Emma looked directly at Vance. I hope you spend every day of your life in prison thinking about the children you hurt, about the families you destroyed, about my mother who died fighting against everything you became. That's the only justice that matters, living with what you did. Judge Morrison was quiet for a long moment after Emma sat down. Then she addressed the defendants. Harrison Vance, Victoria Keene, you have been found guilty of crimes that shock the conscience. You used positions of trust to prey on the most vulnerable. You destroyed families for profit. You murdered witnesses who threatened your enterprise. She pulled out sentencing documents. Harrison Vance, I sentence you to life in prison without possibility of parole on the murder charges. Additional sentences on the trafficking and conspiracy charges to run consecutively. You will die in prison. Vance accepted the sentence without reaction. Victoria Keene, I sentence you to life in prison without possibility of parole. Your betrayal of public trust was absolute. The harm you caused immeasurable. You will also die in prison. The gavel fell. Final, irrevocable. Justice, imperfect and incomplete, but real. Outside the courthouse, Marcus and Emma stood in the winter sunlight. Press was everywhere. Questions shouted. Cameras flashing. They ignored it all. Is it over? Emma asked. The trial is. The rest will take longer. How long? Maybe forever. Healing isn't like a trial. There's no verdict that makes it end. Emma nodded, understanding in her eyes. But we start anyway. We start anyway. Agent Wells found them before they could leave. Colonel Emma, there's someone who wants to meet you. She led them to a conference room where a woman in her 40s waited. She had kind eyes and the tired expression of someone who'd worked too many hours on too many cases. This is Catherine Wells' sister, Agent Wells said. The journalist Sarah was working with before she died. The woman extended her hand. Margaret Wells, Catherine told me what your wife was doing, how brave she was. I wanted to thank you for finishing her work. Your sister did most of it, Marcus said. Maybe, but you made sure it mattered. Margaret pulled out a folder. Catherine left notebooks. Years of investigation into trafficking networks. I've been going through them, working with the FBI. There are more cases out there. More networks like Vance's. She handed the folder to Emma. Your mother's evidence helped break this case, but there are others who need help. Children still out there, families still searching. Margaret paused. Catherine wanted to start a foundation, use her research to help law enforcement and families. I'm going to do that, in her memory and Sarah's. I was hoping you might want to be involved. Emma looked at Marcus. He saw the question in her eyes. Are we ready for this? Can we keep fighting? He thought about Sarah, about her last words. Protect Emma. But Sarah had also fought for justice, had died pursuing it. She'd want Emma to have that choice. What would we do? Emma asked. Testify at other trials, help families navigate the system, work with victim advocates. Be the voice for children who can't speak for themselves. Margaret smiled. Your mother spent 3 years compiling evidence. You spent 6 months in trial. That experience is invaluable. Emma looked at the folder, then at Marcus. Dad, what do you think? I think your mother would be proud either way. If you want to walk away, heal, live your life, that's okay. If you want to fight, I'll be beside you. Marcus took her hand, but the choice is yours. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she opened the folder, scanned the first page. Names of missing children. Dates of disappearances. The same pattern Sarah had seen, extended across a dozen states. We'll help, Emma said, but on our terms. No more secrets. No more going off alone into danger. We work with the FBI with proper protection as a team. Deal, Margaret said. They shook on it. 3 people bound by grief and purpose, and the stubborn belief that maybe, possibly, they could make the world slightly less terrible. 6 months later, Marcus stood in his backyard in Tucson watching Emma pack for West Point. She'd decided to go after all, said she wanted the training, wanted to be better prepared to fight the battles ahead. Sarah's foundation, officially named the Sarah Shepard Foundation for Missing Children, had helped locate 12 kids in its first 6 months, had provided support to 40 families, had worked with the FBI to identify 3 more trafficking networks. It wasn't enough, could never be enough, but it was something. Rosa ran the day-to-day operations with help from Father Brennan. Rafael Cordero had contributed a substantial donation, blood money from his cartel years, now funding the fight against the very networks he'd once supported. Miguel worked as a youth counselor, helping other survivors process their trauma. Marcus consulted on investigations when the FBI needed his tactical expertise, testified at trials when his experience could help convict traffickers, spent his evenings doing physical therapy on a leg that would never be right and a shoulder that ached when it rained. He'd moved Sarah's photo from the bedroom to his office, not to forget her, but to stop living in the past. She was gone, had been gone for 3 years, and Marcus had finally accepted that no amount of justice would bring her back. But it could honor her memory, could make her death mean something. Emma came outside, sat beside him on the porch steps. "You're going to be okay while I'm gone. I survived 28 years in the military. I think I can handle an empty house." "That's not what I meant." Marcus smiled. "I know. And yes, I'll be okay. I've got the foundation work. Got therapy appointments the VA finally approved. Got a purpose beyond just surviving." "Good." Emma leaned against his shoulder. "Mom would be proud of you, you know, of what you've done. She'd be proud of you. You're everything she was. Smart, brave, stubborn as hell. I get the stubborn from you." "Fair." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the desert. The same desert where Marcus had nearly died, where Jimmy had died, where so many others had lost everything. But also the desert where Emma had been rescued, where Vance's network had been broken, where justice, imperfect and incomplete, had finally been served. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Anything. Do you think we won? Really won?" Marcus considered the question. Thought about Vance and Keene in prison. About the 60-plus other arrests from their network. About the children who'd been rescued and the families who'd found closure. But also about the network still operating. About the children still missing. About the scars that would never fully heal. "I think we survived," he said finally. "And some days that's the only victory that matters." Emma nodded, understanding. She'd learned the same hard lessons he had. That justice was messy and incomplete. That winning often felt like losing. That survival was its own kind of triumph. "I'm going to keep fighting," she said. "At West Point, after, whatever comes next, I'm going to finish what Mom started." "I know you will." "Will you keep fighting too?" Marcus looked at his daughter, saw Sarah in her eyes and his own stubbornness in her jaw. Saw a warrior being born from the ashes of trauma and loss. "Yeah," he said, "I'll keep fighting. For Sarah, for Jimmy and Danny, for all the ones we couldn't save." He paused. "And for you, so your generation inherits a world slightly better than the one we got." Emma smiled. "That's all we can do, isn't it? Make it slightly better." "That's all anyone can do." The sun set completely, stars emerging in the desert sky, cold and distant and beautiful. Marcus and Emma sat together in the gathering dark, father and daughter, warriors and survivors, preparing for whatever battles tomorrow would bring. Behind them, the house where Sarah had lived stood quiet and strong, her books still on the shelves, her coffee mug still in the kitchen, her memory woven into every room like threads of gold. She was gone, but her work continued. Her legacy lived on in Emma's courage and Marcus's determination and the foundation that bore her name. Some fights didn't end with victory. They just passed to the next generation, who picked up the weapons and carried on. Marcus Shepard had been Delta Force, had been a husband and father, had been a warrior and a victim and a survivor. Now he was something else. Something Sarah's sacrifice and Emma's strength and his own stubborn refusal to quit had forged from the wreckage of loss. He was the shepherd, not because he saved every lost sheep, but because he never stopped trying, never stopped searching, never stopped fighting for the ones who couldn't fight for themselves. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. Somewhere in America, a child was going missing. A family was beginning the nightmare of searching. The darkness was still out there, hungry and patient. But so was Marcus Shepard. So was Emma. So were all the people Sarah's legacy had inspired. The watch had just begun, and this time the shepherds weren't facing the darkness alone. They had each other. They had purpose. And they had the knowledge that even broken things could be made whole if you were willing to do the work. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't enough. But it was real. And sometimes that was exactly what the world needed. The last shepherd stood on his porch, his daughter beside him, and watched the night sky with eyes that had seen too much and hoped anyway. Because hope wasn't about believing everything would be okay. Hope was about fighting like hell to make it okay, even when every rational reason said to quit. And Marcus Shepard had never been very good at quitting. The end was just another beginning. And the shepherd's watch would continue, generation after generation, until all the lost sheep finally found their way home. I spent 3 weeks researching this story, and Marcus Shepard's choice haunts me still. When his daughter Emma was taken, he had every reason to quit. Broken leg, declared dead, abandoned by his own government. But he crawled 300 miles anyway. Here's my question for you veterans and fathers out there. Would you have made the same choice? Trade everything, your identity, your body, maybe your life, for one chance to save your child? Drop your thoughts below. And if this story moved you, there are more untold missions waiting. Hit subscribe so you don't miss them.